Hello and welcome everyone. This is first time in history that we are introducing a 6 days special master class for SFM subject. And this class will help you to achieve 70 plus. These classes will be available in English language. Hello, welcome everyone to the first day of 6 days master class for SFM. I'm really very excited about this and I hope you too are excited about this. This 6 days will be just fantastic, and this 6 days our target will be 70 plus. Minimum it should be 80 plus, I should say. So you should first write down your expected score which you expect from this batch and which are you are targeting for SFM. Your target score should not be less than 80%. 80 plus should be your target. We are doing this extensive approach. We are doing this extensive. All the efforts are made. This experience and system is put into the place to give the best results. Not just to target for 40-50, but to get a very good results, 80 plus results. So your score expected, write down your score. My score for SFM, you must write it 80 plus, 95, 100, whatever you think you can achieve that. So it's your thinking that will give you a right direction. If your mindset is correct, it will give you a correct direction to achieve any score you think of. So nothing is impossible. 100 marks are also possible if you target it for. So let's begin with this. Now what matters most is how you see yourself. What others are telling you, your family, your relatives, what other friends are telling you, that doesn't matter. What matters is how you see yourself. If you think that you can achieve very good marks, you can achieve rank, then that is possible. What others think, what you know till now, that doesn't matter. If you don't know SFM also, you are still scoring 40-50 and you don't have a clarity, confidence on SFM subject, that doesn't matter. What matters, you think that SFM is very easy, SFM is very scoring, you can score 100, you can score 90 plus, 80 plus, then that is possible for you. So your mindset should be very correct. You should start with a winning mindset. We are not here to just pass. We are winners. We have to win this subject. So we will achieve a great score with our correct mindset. Correct mindset will help you, will guide you that this is my target score and I can achieve it. What are the mistakes? What are the improvements needed? That all guidance will be given if you have a correct goal, correct mindset, a winning mindset. Recently, I talked to some students. Few students, 2-4 students told that, ma'am, I want to go for a rank, please guide me accordingly. So I was very happy, and recently some students said to me that they are joining the course after a long gap of 5 years. Someone said that I am joining this course again after 16 years. So see, such an immense, they have a winning mindset. I'm really happy that to see this mindset in the students. So winning mindset can give you a right direction, can give you right goal. So let's start this days with a winning mindset. What you will need is dedication, mindset, notebook and pen. And what should be the ideal timetable during this 6 days batch? You should daily complete lectures. Daily lectures will be around 6 hours. And you should then self-study for 3 to 4 hours. and for 1 to 2 hours you should give daily test for all the chapters completed on that day. So this way your entire subject will be covered in 6 days with the test, chapter wise test. After this you will spend 1.5 days like an exam atmosphere and revise the whole SFM, and then in a half day you will give full test of SFM. So this way in 8 to 10 days your entire SFM subject will be completed. Now what will be our approach for studying? So for theory we will understand theory with example. After understanding that, we will have a keyword revision. After this keyword revision you should revise the keywords very properly and then practice the keywords in the practice sheet and then appear for that chapter test. This should be the approach for theory. Next, for practical, what should be the approach? We will understand the concepts which are relevant to solve the questions. We will understand the formulas. We will do A and B category questions. After that, you have to self-practice the questions of that chapter, then review. Along with it, you have to review all the formulas and then appear for the test of that chapter. If you face any doubt after the lecture, you can ask me that. And how this will help you, this ideal timetable will help you to avoid the silly mistakes in exams, because your test will be done, you will have an improvements in yourself, so you won't do the silly mistakes in exams will not be the experiments, exam will be the performance, experiments will be done before in test, exam will be the performance. So doing this will help you to keep the speed in writing, and it will boost your confidence too, that you are confident on a subject, you know this subject very well in and out. Then this exemption in SFM will help you to clear the CA goal also. It will make easier your path to clear the CA, and there is a little surprise gift from my side. If you complete all this timetable on time, that is, if you complete when the day you get lectures and you complete it within 8 to 10 days and give all the test in that 8 to 10 days, then we will send you a surprise gift for maintaining such a dedication and going in a right direction. So there is a surprise gift if you complete it on timely. Now let's just pray. Prayers gives immense energy. Let's pray and start with a positive energy. So pray for a minute that you should hold an energy to score good, to score 80, 90, 100, whatever you expect to. So let's take a minute and pray to get that energy. Now with this immense positivity and energy, let's begin with our chapter. We will carry this energy till our exams. Everyone around us should feel that energy. Our energy to work for our goal, our winning energy, our winning vibes should be felt by person around us. They should tell you that you seem so energetic, yeah. So you should hear that words. Everyone should feel that positive energy of yours to work for your goal. And now let's begin with the chapter. First, we are taking up the chapter second, that is risk management. This chapter has an exam weightage of around 4 marks, and this is basically a theory chapter, but there are practical questions based on one concept, that is value at risk. That is an important concept. And in recent past 4 attempts, no practical question has been asked on that value at risk. So my expectation is that in May 23 there are likely chances that they ask the practical questions based on value at risk. They can also ask test theory. No one can predict, but there are highly likely chances for practical questions from this, according to me. And there are 15 questions in this book for this chapter, and you should have a proper last day planning for every chapter. So I have provided you a guidance that this chapter should take 40 minutes on the day of exam. To revise this chapter, there should be 40 minutes allocated to it. And you know that you cannot cover each and every question on the day of exam. Even though we have very selected questions, very questions which cover all the topics, and very limited questions in numbers, around 400, but still you cannot complete all the 400 questions on the day of exam. So you have to sort out the questions beforehand, so that you just not give waste your time deciding what you have to cover or what you have not to cover. So there should be a proper planning for that. I have also shared a ABC ranking, and that is a guidance. That is a guidance from my side, and you can change the ABC ranking according to your preference, according to your potential, according to how you grasp that concept, how you grasp that question. So you can shift ABC according to yourself, and according to me, there should be 8 questions which you can cover in around 40 minutes. You can plus minus that, and there these are the questions suggested from my side to cover on the last day. You can plus minus this question according to your uh, grasping the chapter or grasping that question. So you can shift and you can change according to your need. So now let's begin with the chapter talking about risk management. First, we should know about risk. Every aspect of our life and each decision we take in day to day life have some element of risk in it. You are pursuing a CA degree. This has also a risk in its side. There may be a risk that you fall into multiple attempts and not clear it well. So there is a risk, but at the same time, there is a risk management strategy too. The proper study plan, proper strategy can lead you to the success. I know the risk is higher, but the higher risk, if you manage this risk, there is higher success too. So we should approach the risk as an opportunity and open up our wider opportunities and just work at our best. So, so talking about risk management, I think there is a mantra that don't risk more than you can afford to lose. You should take up the risk which you can afford to lose. So, if you think that you cannot lose this attempt is very valuable for you. So, you have to put the energy for that. You cannot take a risk and just take up a chance and just appear for an exam without revisions proper, without proper test attempt. You cannot just appear for exam as an experiment. So you don't have to take a risk of that attempt if it is so valuable for you. So you have to put in efforts, you have to put in strategy to improve yourself, to ensure that you don't fall in the multiple attempts and clear this attempt only. So you should take a calculated risk. If you are avoiding test, if you are avoiding revisions, then it is not a calculated risk. You are just randomly going for the exams. So you have to take a proper risk management strategy for your studies too. The business also suffers risk, and business also applies the risk management strategy in their business approach. So talking about business risk, what is the business risk? Every business runs for the profits. Anything, any event, any happening any factor which affects the profitability of a business and take up the business to the losses is a risk factor for a business. So anything that threatens an ability to generate a profit at a target level or experience a loss is a business risk, and every business need to address the risk. They cannot ignore the risk, but it should be managed systematically. So we in this chapter we will study about various risks and how to identify that risk and how to take the measures to mitigate that risk. Identification is the first step. If you don't know what risk you are involved in, you cannot take the steps to correct it. So identification is the first step, then comes the measures to mitigate that risk. So first we are dealing with the different type of risk the business suffers. There are four types. The first is strategic risk, next compliance risk, third operational risk, and fourth is financial risk. Talking about first strategic risk, strategic risk is a risk that your strategy for the business is less effective and it lead you to the losses. It is not proper to make you the sufficient profits. So a strategic failure can lead you to the losses. Talking about your studies, you can also face the same. If you don't have a proper study strategy, your wrong study strategy can lead you to the attempts. So a business should have a well set strategy that work for the business. And we were talking about this examples of a strategic risk. There are three examples in your module. These three examples are of your module only. uh, First is Kodak company. Kodak company used to makes the camera, and we all know that there has been these rolls which we have to insert in the cameras, and Kodak company make huge profits from these rolls. So you will be surprised to know that Kodak company was the first company to develop the digital camera, but it failed to launch it into the market because they haven't strategy to sell this rolls instead of bringing the digital camera which will replace this. So they kept on continuing to sell these rolls, and they didn't launch the digital camera. They didn't launch it, but the market needed it, and the other companies made the digital cameras, and the Kodak market was just zero. Then Kodak was just taken out of the market. It went into the bankruptcy, so it has to face the shutdown of a business just due to a simple strategic failure. It failed to adapt to the technology. Similar case was for Nokia. Nokia used to be a leader in a mobile industry before the touchscreen mobiles came into the market. Nokia was very trusted brand. Its phone were very durable, but when the touchscreen mobiles came into the market, Nokia failed to upgrade to that technology because they thought that their phones are very durable and very effective, and people will continue to this and don't adapt to the change. But they were wrong to estimate that, and they failed to upgrade, and they just went into the very losses, and now they have recame with the touchscreen mobiles. The Kodak and Nokia company faced the losses due to their wrong strategies. And if you manage the risk of strategic risk, then you can also bring the positive results. So there is a positive example of company Xerox. Xerox company used to make the photocopying machine. Such large photocopying machine was being built up. Then came the market of laser printing. So Xerox company adapt that change and started to make the laser printing machines. After making that laser printing machine, it had a competitive edge and take up the market soon, and it results into the very much profits for the Xerox company. So managing the risk and taking a right strategy can also lead you to the profits. So you have to manage the risk properly. The next risk is of a compliance risk. Compliance risk is, we know that every business needs to follow some rules and regulation when they have to conduct their business. Every business has to ensure that they comply, that if they don't comply with the rules and regulation, they have to bear heavy fines and penalties. These heavy fines and penalties can lead to the losses. So losses occurred due to non-compliance is called a compliance risk. A classic example for that is, we all know that telecom companies need to follow the trial regulations, and according to it they have to pay a license fee and a spectrum fee. But many telecom companies are not paying that fee, and they have to suffer a 1.34 lakh crore loss, that is fees and penalties for various companies. So various companies are facing such a huge amount of loss just due to the non-compliance. So non-compliance can also put you into a risk. This is not your module example. This is just an example from my side for understanding the concept. The example in your module is that a cement company want to start with a sugar business. So if they are entering into a sugar business, they have to comply all the rules and regulation which are applicable to sugar industry. They are shifting the sugar industry in different states, so they have to comply the rules and regulation of that state too, because every state had some their rules and regulations. And now talking about operational risk. So operational risk is a risk which is being faced due to a process failure or a people not performing its task properly, because a business carry out its business either through processes or through people. So both are responsible to carry out the business operations. Any failure at the part of process or people can lead you to the operational risk. A classic example from my side is that we all have heard about the nano burst issues. Nano burst issues was due to a faulty product, a faulty part in a manufacturing process which was not detected. So Tata has to recall 1,40,000 nano cars from the market and replace that faulty part free of cost to the customer. That was free of cost for the customers but not for the company. Company has to bear 115 crore cost to replace that part in 1,40,000 nano car. So such an heavy cost was beared due to operational risk. And the example in your module is that employee has paid 1 lakh instead of 10,000. Maybe intentionally or may not be intentionally, but the higher amount was being taken up from the company. So this is just a little example. 90,000 may be a big amount for a company or may not be. So even the amount is small or big, the wrong the wrong behavior of a people or the failure of a process can lead you to the operational risk. The next and final type of risk is financial risk. This financial risk arises due to the change in financial factors. Financial factors can be like exchange rate. If you are dealing in export import, and then change in exchange rate can impact your profits. Prices can impact the profits, they have direct connection to the profits. Credit rating can affect the profits, because if your credit rating is low, then business suffer uh, problems while raising the funds. They have to borrow the funds at the higher interest, so interest rates and credit rating can also affect the profitability. The example, there is no example in module for this, but I am giving you an example for a clarity that BMW company used to make car and they sell their cars worldwide. So they have made a proper plan that if suppose they have manufacturing plant at one place only and they carry out the logistic from one country to another country of the world, they have to bear a very heavy logistic cost, and this can lead to the price rise and it can affect the profits of the company. So they have made a proper strategy to make a manufacturing plants at various parts of the world, and from that manufacturing plant they serve the various countries nearby them to avoid the heavy logistic cost and take up the right price and right profits from the business. This question is less important according to me as it has been asked in the previous attempts. So, still, but we have to cover all the question. We won't skip the questions. So, risk can are categorized in four. Strategic risk is a chance that a strategy will lead into the losses or it will become ineffective and not achieve its goals. Now, what are the factors which arise to a strategic risk? There can be a shifts in consumer demand, like Nokia, Kodak face this issue. Then there can be a competitive pressure, like Geo gave a competitive pressure to all the existing telecom companies. So competitive pressure can also be a reason for a strategic failure. Even though they were working, the other telecom companies were working with a right strategy, but a competitive pressure make their strategy failure. Jio launched the with a welcome offer with free offers. So the strategy of other telecom companies went wrong just due to the competitive pressure. Similarly, merger and integration can also pose a risk to the other companies. Technological changes like Nokia faced this issue. Senior management turnover, that is like your senior management is uh, continuously changing. You don't have a fixed management for a longer period. You have frequent changes in management. So frequent changes in management will lead to a strategic risk because the person who made the strategy has a different intention, who is implementing is has a different way, and the person who is changing that strategy has a different perspective. So there is wider difference in implementing the strategy, so it won't work with that efficiency and it will pose a strategic risk for a company. The Kodak example, Nokia example, and Xerox example we have also dealt it in detail. Next, the compliance risk. Non-compliance can lead to penalties in form of fine and imprisonment. Business has to comply with various laws like Companies Act, SEBI guidelines, and CSR, and many others. So example is company ventures into a new business, new geographical area, then they have to put the efforts to comply all the rules and regulations of that industry area or that state. Then operational risk, failure on the part of a company to cope up with day-to-day operational problems. That that is day-to-day operational problems are not being dealt with properly, so that poses a operational risk for a company. This risk relates to a people as well as process. Then talking about financial risk, it is due to change in financial condition like price, exchange rate, credit rating, and interest rate. Now, the next question is related to a counterparty risk. Now, what is counterparty risk? If this risk is due to the third person, the risk which arises due to the third person, like your suppliers, like your debtors, and this risk is being faced by a banking company. That is like if you have an obligations, the other one, the daters, your daters have an obligations and they don't honor your obligations, and they now there can be like supplier don't you have paid advance to the supplier but the supplier have not delivered the goods to you, then also you can face the business risk, and that risk is arised due to the third party, maybe your supplier, your debtors. And the credit risk which bank faces is also due to the third party, their customers, and this risk is also covered into the counterparty risk. So non honoring of obligations, non delivery, or non repayment. These all three are the reasons for a counterparty risk. We all know that NPs are growing at a very rapid speed. So banking industry is facing this risk, counterparty risk. What are the methods to identify the counterparty risk? How we can identify that our business suffers the counterparty risk? Once we know that we are facing this risk, then we can take the steps to mitigate that. So identifying, you can know by if you have a faced failure to obtain the necessary resources. Say for example, there's a construction company and they have paid advance to, they have some contracts with their suppliers, but the supplier didn't supplied that goods to them, and they have to face the high prices to, they have to buy that material at higher price, or their construction could not be completed in time, so they have to bear the late fees for late completion. So there can be a risk due to not obtaining the resources at timely. So this is an example through which you can relate to your points. The next is due to action of government or a foreign government. Say for example, government has given a state to someone that you cannot recover amount from this person. So action of a government or any action by foreign government can lead to the counterparty risk, or else decline by a party that it does not show up, it does not pay your obligations, then, or it has been in an insolvent position. So they are not in a position to pay off the debt to you. So then in that case also there will be a counterparty risk. Now talking about techniques to manage. Once you know, then you have to manage it. How would you manage it? First, giving the loan, giving the money, giving the credit to others. First, you have to inspect that party. How would you inspect them? You should carry out the due diligence. Now, due diligence is a wider area. This is an area where many chartered accountant practice too. The due diligence report is being made to ensure that the party you are dealing with is credit worthy to deal with. Once you know that you can deal with this party, then you have to set a limit. You can't just give on n number of credit to a party. They have their limits. So after due diligence, you have to fix their limits. You don't have to overcommit to a single party, because a single entity, if they fail to pay you off, then you can be in a business risk, you can be in a financial losses just due to that single entity. So you should not overcommit, and you should also review the limits timely. We all know that we have CC limits which is based on working capital, so we bank review the limits timely, so to ensure that we don't give credit more than the limits. And if even you have taken so much steps to cover up this risk, still there are failures by the customers, then you have to take the action. You have to take action, rapid action. If you see that there is likelihood of defaults, and if you have taken any performance guarantee or insurance regarding that debt, or regarding that credit, you should exercise that. You should use that performance, use that insurance, use that guarantee. So these can be the techniques through which you can manage the counterparty risk. So you have to inspect limits. 3 points are regarding limits, and you have to still, if you face the risk, then you have to take the action. So this is the linkage. So we are studying theory with the entire linkages and examples so that you can relate and learn it, and you don't have to just mug up the theory without any logics, without any sense. You know the proper sense of all the points, so it will be easy for you to learn and revise the chapter. So, counterparty risk arises due to non honoring of obligation. Default by a counterparty also covers the credit risk. So, failure to obtain resources, restrictions from government, action of foreign government, let down, or insolvent. We have to manage, we have to carry due diligence, know the limits, and do not overcome it, review the limits. Even after taking such steps, if you face the risk, then you have to take a rapid action and use the guarantee and insurance if you have taken that. Now, the next is political risk. What is political risk? Political risk is a risk faced by a business due to the action of government. Now, this risk is mostly faced by overseas investor. Why only overseas investors? Because the investors, local investors, would know their local government. We, in being in India, we would know that what businesses Indian government would support in, and how are the economic conditions in the India for that business. But if there is any investor from UK, US, then they might not know what are the economic conditions in India, how the Indian government is supporting that business, or they are not supporting some type of businesses. So overseas investors face this political risk. Like, take an example, India has banned single use plastic products. So if anyone want to set up this type of industry in India, then it would be a trouble from them, because the government would not support this business in India. So we have, while taking up the businesses, we have to ensure that don't we don't face the political risk in our that business. So what are the steps to identify the political risk? There may be three type of restrictions from government relating to the finance. There may be a restriction that you cannot borrow more than this from outside, or from this. There may be a restriction that you cannot convert your money in this currency. There may be a restriction that you cannot remit your profits, all of your profits, to some country. There may be restriction on remittance, conversion, or borrowing. Any restrictions will affect your business, can lead to your losses. So these are the steps through which you can know that there is a political risk in your business if you face any of this. And that can be a government intervention. Government intervention can be related to the price. There are many products in which government regulates the price. So if you are dealing in any such products, you are in such industry where the price is controlled by government, then you face the political risk. And there can be government intervention related to patents. Your patents may be registered, but government has declared them invalid, or they have destruct your overseas properties. So three restrictions on finance and three P's intervention: price, patent, and properties. All these intervention can impact you, and this can be an indication that you face the political risk. Then comes to how to manage the political risk. For managing the risk, you have to take up the steps You have to refer the political ranking. You have to prefix the price. You have to focus on the resident labor. You should focus on resident labor. You should focus on local joint ventures so that government does not intervene in your businesses. You should also study about government popularity, how popular the government is, how supportive the government is. We all know Mr. Narendra Modi has put our India at a very good place in the world. So we have a good government rank popularity, and we should also study the economic conditions of that country so that we can know how business are being supported by government in that country. And we should also inquire from embassies. Every countries have embassies in other countries, so we should inquire before starting up the business. We should inquire from their embassies that how the economic conditions, how supportive is the government for that business and that industry. So these this is the political risk, the methods to identify it. Then comes the techniques to manage. You can local source the raw material and labor. If you source them locally, then government won't interrupt and don't intervene into your businesses. So either you can take up the businesses through joint ventures with the Indian or any country you are setting up with. So you uh, so the compliances, you don't have to face the strict regulations if you enter through the joint ventures in that country. Or you can source through a local financing. If you don't need to borrow from other country, you don't have to remit. So government intervention will be reduced if you source your finance local. Or there can be a prior negotiations, there can be a prior understanding contracts for dealing with political risk correctly. Now then comes the interest rate risk. Now what is the interest rate risk? If you face the losses due to change in interest rate. Now how can an interest rate affect? Interest rate can affect the investments made. This interest rate risk is very important for the banking companies because their assets consist of the investments which have interest bearing securities. So this risk is very critical for the banking industry. Now how could a interest rate affect an asset's value? There is an inverse relation between interest rate and assets value. If the interest rates goes up, then the assets value comes down, and if interest rates goes down, the assets values is going up. Now how is this? Let's understand with an example. If you have are now having a 6% bonds, and now in the market their rate has increased, that is 7% bond. Now would anyone take your 6% bond? No, they would try to take a 7% bond. So the value of your bonds will decrease if the interest rate increase. So there is inverse relation between them. Now what are the methods to identify that your business carries out the interest rate risk? To identify that, you should study the monetary policy, or you should take note of any action taken by government. Why? Because the government is one who regulates this interest rate. So interest rates are regulated by government, so you have to study the monetary policy and any action like demonetization. Demonetization has a very impact on the interest rate were lesser when the demonetization came into the effect. And you can also study the economy and industry. You should refer to the industrial data and economic growth. If the economic growth and industry are growing properly and they are stable and there is no volatility in that, then interest rate are there are chances that interest rate will also be stable, and there won't be any higher chances for an interest rate risk. So you should study the economy and industry growth, and at the same time you should also check for the foreign investment. Is foreign investment of a sufficient amount in that country? If a sufficient amount of foreign investment is in a country, then it suggests indicate that interest rate risk may not be such high in that country. Because when the foreign investors are investing in a country, then they would ensure that they get the returns from it, so interest rate won't fluctuate so much. And you can also study the stock market changes, because stock market also impact the interest rate. If your stock market is highly volatile and it gives you so much of returns, then many investor would take up the opportunity and not invest in banks for an interest, and rather they would go into the stock market. So stock market can also affect the interest rates. So you have to study all these factors to identify that there can be an interest rate risk affecting you or not. Then comes how to manage the interest rate risk. Interest rate risk is managed through derivatives. Now we will study about future, forward, swap, and all these are the derivative instruments. These we will study about this in derivatives chapter in detail. But what is done through these instruments? We need to fix the interest rate through these instruments, so that we don't have to suffer the fluctuations in the interest rate. And so we fix the interest rate, which will help us to manage our interest rate risk. So interest rate risk is a potential for investment losses due to change in interest rate. It is important for banking. You should study monetary policy, government action, economy, industry, stock market, and foreign investment. How would you manage future, forward, swap, cap, collars? All these are the derivative instruments. Now, what is the currency risk? Currency risk is a risk faced due to change in exchange rates. Now, this risk can be faced by importer or exporter, because they deal in the foreign transactions, foreign currency transactions, so they would be impacted by the change in exchange rate. Say, for example, a US investor invest in a euro stocks. Uh, and then now euro per dollar rate has increased, so their assets will also increase. So change in exchange rate will impact its assets. So if euro by dollar rate is reduced, then euro assets value will also be decreased. Now, what are the methods to identify the currency risk? As we have studied that interest is regulated by the government. Similarly, currency exchange rates are also regulated by the government. So we have to understand about the government action, the change in government, so that we can identify there be a possibility of currency risk or not. Now, currency exchange rate are being determined through interest rate and inflation rate. Because interest rate, we would study that interest rate parity. That is, interest rate determine the exchange rate. We would study this in forex chapter, where we will determine the exchange rate based on the interest rate of that countries. And there would be a purchase power parity, where we would uh, decide the currency exchange rate based on the inflation rate of that countries. So inflation rate and interest rate directly affect the exchange rate. So these two rates affect the currency exchange rate, and this could create element of a currency risk. So we should study this interest rate and inflation rate. If they are stable, then there are likely less chances for the currency risk. If they are not stable, not stable current inflation or interest rate, then there could be a chances for a currency risk. Now, currency risk can also be due to some extraordinary circumstances like natural calamity or war. Now, recently we have seen Russia Ukraine war, and this war has impacted the currency so much. So, we can witness that currency risk may be due to an extraordinary circumstances like natural calamity and war. Now, once you face the currency risk, how would you manage it? It is also being managed through derivatives, which is future forward swaps. We will study in detail what all are this, but in this also we fix our exchange rate so that we should not suffer a currency risk. So, currency risk affect the organization dealing with in foreign exchange. It can impact the importer and exporter. The example is Infosys and Indian Oil Corporation, because oil is being imported and many technological companies export their services. So, this can impact them as an exporter or as an importer. Now, what are the methods? You have to study the government action. There is example that when UK government decided to diverge from the European Union, the pound was at its lowest. And this is the 1980s incident. Then you should also study the change in government. Their attitude can impact the currency rates. Non-nominal interest rate and inflation rate should be studied, because nominal interest rate through interest rate parity affect the exchange rate, and inflation rate through purchase power parity theory affect the exchange rate. Then there can be natural calamity, war, which can impact the currency. How would you manage? Through future options, forward and swaps. Now comes what is the liquidity risk. Now, what is the liquidity risk? Liquidity risk is that you don't have a sufficient cash to pay your liabilities. You don't have a liquidity. You are unable to generate the adequate cash. Now, what can be the reason for this liquidity risk? There could be a mismatch in your working capital cycle. Like, you may receive your amount in 3 months and you have to pay after 2 months. So there is imbalance in a working capital cycle. You have to pay first, then you would receive. So this can create an imbalance, mismatch in working capital cycle, and this will lead to a liquidity risk. Now this risk is very important for banking company, because they need to deal with cash. They have to make investments, they have to give take deposits, they have to take loans, they have to give loans. So they have to manage their cash, their cycle of cash, to ensure they don't face liquidity risk. So, inability of organization to meet their liabilities when they become due, and unable to generate the adequate cash due to mismatch in period of cash flow generation will lead to the liquidity risk, and it is important for banking companies. Now comes the financial risk evaluation from different views. Now, how the financial risk is being viewed from different perspective. There are three perspectives from which a financial risk can be viewed. The three views are: first is stakeholders, next is companies, and third one is of government. Now, what is the financial risk from the perspective of stakeholders? When we talk about stakeholders, major stakeholders are equity shareholders, which are concerned about the risk. So, when your gearing ratio, they look about the gearing ratio of a company. What does the gearing ratio signify? Gearing ratio signifies the amount of debt in your company. When gearing ratio is low, that means your company has less debt. When debt is less, then the chances of defaults and risk is also less. When the debt is high, that is high gearing ratio, then there are chances of being defaults, making defaults and going into the bankruptcy. So when debt is high and if you make low profits, then you can go into the financial crunch. So risk is high when debt is high. High gearing ratio, high risk. Low gearing ratio, low risk. So stakeholders take the decision of financial risk based on gearing ratio. Now next is the view of company. How the company views the financial risk. If a company is borrowing so much an amount and they are not able to repay it, then there could be a financial risk. Or a company has lent so many amount but they are unable to recover them, there is a default risk in recovering the amount, then also they can face a financial risk. Those financial risk from a company perspective is either borrowing excessively or lending excessively where there are chances of default. So these both factors can pose a risk, financial risk for a company. So company view financial risk from that perspective. Next is from government's perspective. Government perspective is uh, bank and financial institution are the pillars to regulate the finance. So when a bank is failed or there is a downgrading in the financial institution, then government can face the financial risk. So now we have seen that many banking revival strategies are being made to revive the banks, and so that economy can be made stable, the finance can be made stable in the country. So from government perspective, if there is any failure in a bank or downgrading in a financial institution, then government faces the financial risk. So there is an example that Lehman Brothers in 2008, due to bankruptcy filed by the Lehman Brothers, there were many job lost, nation was in a recession, and this impacted the whole country. So government ensure that banks and financial institutions run properly, else they will pose a financial risk for the government. So there are three perspectives. From stakeholder perspective, they view the financial gearing ratio. If the high the gearing, high the risk. From company, they see that they don't borrow excessively or they don't lend excessively, so that there are not chances of a default. Next, from government view, from government view, if there is a failure of a bank or downgrading of a financial institution, then there can be a financial risk from the perspective of government. So different views. Equity shareholders view the financial gearing ratio. High the gearing ratio, high would be the chances for default. Then from the company's viewpoint, if the company borrow excessively or lend to someone who defaults, then company can be in a financial risk. From a government perspective, if there is failure in bank like Lehman Brothers or there is downgrading in financial institution, then there can be a financial risk for from the point of government. Till now, we have studied about various risk methods to identify it, techniques to manage it, and we have studied financial risk from a different perspectives. Now we will study about value at risk. This is a very interesting and an important topic. You would, if you ask someone, then many of the students don't understand this topic. But I can say that you will have 100% conceptual clarity about this topic You can ask any of your friends about this topic, they won't have this much clarity. So let's start with this topic. Now, what is value at risk? Till now we have understood the various risk, but we don't know how impact will a risk create in our business. So we have to value the risk, we have to measure the risk, that how much can a risk impact our business. We have to give that a value to understand the impact it would create on our business. So it is a measuring tool for a risk. We have to value the risk. That is a topic, value at risk. Now, what does this do? This answer two questions, that is, what is the worst case scenario? What would be your, how much investment could you lose? What will be your loss, and what are the chances that this would be the scenario? This worst case scenario would happen. What are its chances? What is the timing of its occurrence? And how much would be your loss? These all answers are given by value at risk. Now, understanding a value at risk, we have to understand various base to build up how the value at risk is being calculated and why it is being calculated. So we have to first understand the logic. Before understanding the logic, let me give you a glimpse. Like, it is just you can't relate it correctly now, but when you understand all the concept, then you can link that this is the actual value at risk. Now, value at risk is being denoted, it's being a bell shaped curve. You have seen bell in temples. Now, this bell shaped curve is a standard normal distribution curve. Now, what is it? We will understand that. Now, this is a standard normal distribution curve, and if we say that from here is our risk, this is a point of our risk, then area to the left is our value at risk, and area to the right is our chances for making profits. These are the chances for making profits, and area to the left is our value at risk. Now, why area to the left is value at risk, we will understand it. Now, let's first see how the value at risk is denoted. Every measure has some denotation. Say, for example, we measures the weight. So, weight is being measured in kgs, grams. Similarly, value at risk has its denotation too. So, we can write that 5% value at risk for one day is rupees 1 lakh. Now, this is the denotation. That is, it contains three elements. First is confidence level, the next is time, and the third is loss amount. It can be loss percentage or it can be loss amount. Now, what does the confidence level reflect? Confidence level reflect that there are chances that your loss will be more than this. These are the chances. This is the chance that your loss will be more than the specified amount. Now, what is the timing for this loss is being also denoted in a value at risk. Now, this 1 lakh loss is predicted for one day, not for a week or a year. So, time limit is also very important to identify the risk, to measure the risk. So, what is the interpretation of this denotation is that there are 5% chances that your loss in one day will be more than 1 lakh. So, meaning that there is 95% chances that your loss for one day is less than 1 lakh. So, this is a probability for loss. Now, what we calculate is we calculate value at risk mostly at 95% and 99%. Now, what is this percentage? How it arrives? We will understand all these aspects. Now, as I have told that loss can also be represented in percentage. Now, what this percentage will mean that whatever value of your portfolio is, your loss will be the some percentage of specified percentage of that your portfolio value. Say for example, the loss is 2%, then if we take an example that our portfolio is of 10 lakh, then loss will be of 20,000. Meaning by that 5% chances are there that one day loss will be more than 20,000, or 95% chances are that one day loss will be less than 20,000. So you can arrive at your loss amount given the percentage. So what all this is, what is this standard normal distribution, how we calculate this probability? Now this probability is being calculated on the basis of Z score. Now what is the Z score? Z score is a term that defines the standard that helps to convert a normal distribution to a standard normal distribution. Now, what is normal distribution and standard normal distribution? Talking first about a normal distribution, first let we understand the normal distribution. Here is an example, like this scale represent the weights of a people of around age 18 years. Now, if we take a data, then average weight of 18 years Indian person is 60 kg. Now, this is an average. It is also called mean. Okay. Now, we have taken a scale that a maximum weight at this age can be around 85 and minimum weight at this age can be around 35. So this 85 and this 35 are extremities. Now let me say that if we have a weight of 75, if some person has a weight of 75, then how much away is he from the mean weight? This is uh, this is the what we have to calculate. Now say for example, I am standing here and I travel 1 kilometer to the right and I travel 1 kilometer to the left. In either ways, I travel for 1 kilometer. The distance is same, though I have traveled in a different direction. So the area to the left is having has the less value than the mean. That is, if you fall in this area, that means that that person's weight is less than mean, that person's weight is less than 60. And if I am in this area, this means that this person has a weight more than 60. Now what is the probability? This, as this is an average, a mean 60, so 50, that means that 50% of population will be in this area having a less weight than 60, and 50% of person will have a weight more than 60, as this is an average weight. So the probability of going this side is 0.5 and probability of going this side is 0.5. So the entire probability of this area is 1. Okay. Now, as we see, if we see scale like 15 centimeter scale, basic 1 centimeter, then 2 centimeter, it has millimeters in between. So this is the way a scale is represented. It has a difference of 1 centimeter each. So here we also have some difference of measuring that standard scale. So here a standard deviation is of 5. Okay, every one step is of 5 kg. Every one step you move in any direction has a value of 5 kg. Now, if you say that I have to move to the 75, how many times it will be away from it? It will be away 3 steps. You have to take 3 steps to reach to the 75. Similarly, if I talk about 45, you have to take 3 steps to reach to the 45. Even though directions of both is different, but the distance remains the same. As I talked in an example that I travel 1 kilometer to the right, or either I travel to 1 kilometer to the left, the distance will remain the same. Now, how would it be identified? How would this 3 be arrived at? How can we know that how much far we are from an average? So, taking a difference 75 minus 60, this comes to 15. Now average our one step is of 5 kg. So how many steps? So 15 divided by 5 would be our 3. So this will give you a value that how many steps are you away from your mean. So similarly for 45, 45 minus 60 divided by 5 will give you minus 3. Now this minus reflect that you are traveling to the left. That is, you have a value lesser than your mean. Plus sign represent that you have a value more than mean. So minus and plus just reflect the direction. Now, talking about this is a standard normal distribution curve. This curve in this part is a mirror of this part. So, if I am standing at this part, 65 or 55, so this area will be equal to this area. Okay, what is this means that if I travel from this as and when I travel to the right of the curve, my probability area covered will be increased. Starting from 0, in the left part, my area covered will be 0.5 because this has 50% of population. Then when I start from here, then it will be more than 50%. So this will continue more than 50% up to probability of 1. So if we have this area to, if we have this area will be same as this area over here. So these are the mirror reflection. If you know the area to the one side of the curve, you can calculate the area to the other side of the curve too. So now what we have calculated here is our formula for z. Now z is x, your any value, minus mean divided by the standard deviation. So you don't have to mug up the formulas. You know the logics how formula has been arrived to. So this is our z score. When we don't take a curve based on our data, when we take a here z value, then this is called a standard normal distribution. Now what will be this useful for? Z score will help you to compare two data sets, as every data set has its own mean value, its own value. So how would you compare that? How far are you from the mean? So you have to take the mean to a 0 position, then calculate and represent z value of every data. Then you can easily say that I am this steps away from the mean. So you can compare based on this z value, you can compare two data sets, two investments values, and this will help you to analyze the investment. Now we have understood how would we calculate the z, saying that if I say that consider this to be a profit curve. So the area to the left will represent the loss or less profits, and area to the right will represent profits. So whenever you travel to the left of the curve, that represent that your loss will increase. So our value at risk is thus the left side of the curve. So left side of the curve represent the value at risk. So understanding all this concept, you have now finally you can conclude that why value at risk is to the left hand side of the curve. So this is a normal distribution. Given a data set's value, we convert it into a standard normal distribution through z-score. This will help to compare the investments. So a standard normal distribution. So we talked about the probabilities, that what probabilities are covered under the areas. So maximum population will be in this area. Extremities will have a lesser area as there will be less population which have the extreme weights. The major population will have these average weights around this differences of, say example, 50, or here we can say that 70. So the more population is covered in this area. This area covers 64 percentage population. So how this population percentage, not about just population, how this percentage is being calculated? This is being calculated through a standard normal distribution table, z-score table. Now how to read that and how to arrive at the percentages, we will look at that. And before that, we have understood the z-score. What is our z-score? Now for z-score, we also need a standard deviation. For value at risk, to calculate the value at risk, we need a standard deviation. Now what does the standard deviation means? That what amount what will be the amount of fluctuation. Say for example, I have 1 lakh of portfolio, then if in average my 1 day fluctuation is of 1000. So this isn't standard deviation of my portfolio, that in 1 day my portfolio can fluctuate for 1000 rupees. So this is given by the standard deviation. What is the standard deviation? How it is calculated? Your x minus average, then taking a square of it, divided by n. How many values you have in average of in that data set. This will give you the standard deviation of your portfolio. So this is the investments standard deviation. For portfolio, you have to calculate the portfolio of, standard deviation of portfolio. For standard deviation of portfolio, you need to calculate the variance of portfolio. What would be the variance? It would be the variance of one security plus variance of other security plus 2 into standard deviation of A, standard deviation of B, multiply by correlation coefficient R. Now what does this R signifies? Say for example, I have two investments in my portfolio. When market increases by 10%, my investment in A increases by 10% and investment in B decreases by 10%. Now, what would be the net return for my portfolio? One investment is increasing 10% and other is decreasing 10%. So, my net portfolio will have a zero value. So, how this both investments are related will affect my portfolio. So this correlation coefficient is very important to arrive at the risk of that portfolio. Now, how it is this calculated? This is a formula. We will understand it in detail in a portfolio chapter. Now, uh, from this variance, we will calculate the standard deviation, that is under root variance. So, now we know this how our investment can fluctuate. We know the probability of fluctuation. This Z score will give us a probability for fluctuation. Now, from standard deviation, we know how much it fluctuate. Now we would know that in what time this fluctuation could be happen. So our value at risk contains three components. That first is confidence level, that is probability, that is Z. The second one is the loss, which is represented by standard deviation, and the third is time in which that loss can happen. So our formula of value at risk will be the multiplication of these three, that is Z multiplied by standard deviation multiplied by T. Now a very important logic over here, as this standard deviation is under root, standard deviation is calculated as under root, so we also take the under root of time so that our base for calculation should be similar. To arrive at correct value, we should take the correct way. So this standard deviation is under root. So this t is also being under root. So you don't have to mug up the formulas why this t is in under root. If you ask your friends, and many of the students don't know the logic of this formula, but you know this, so you don't have to mug up. You know the logic how this formula is being arrived at. So value at risk has three components: a time frame, a confidence level, and a loss amount. Now, how would we arrive at a probability? There is, I told that there are Z score tables. Now, how that Z score, there can be a different type of Z score table. The one table reflects that when Z is negative value, Z has a negative value, then this table reflects the area to the left of Z. Okay. Say for example, my Z is over here, then area to the left of Z is being reflected in this table. Now, how would you understand this table? When we start from here, our probability is 0. As in we grow to the right, our probability area covered will be increasing, and it will increase up to 0.5 over here. Okay, so see our table from -3 around start with 0 value, and it at 0 it ends with the 0.5. So this here it is a 50% probability, 50% area is covered in this area. So this table reflects all these probabilities. Now the second table is when Z has a positive value, then this table reflects the area to left of Z. Say for example, my Z is over here, then this will reflect this area. Now, just apply a common sense. This is 0.5. So, any value of this table will be greater than 0.5 because you have already covered this 0.5 area. Now we are growing still more to the left. Oh, sorry, still more to the right. So we will cover area greater than 0.5. So our table will start from 0.5 and it will end up to here to value of 1. So this is the way you can understand the table, what data is given in the table. Now the other table is that this reflect when Z is positive, then this table gives you the area between mean and z. That is this area. So the above table was giving you entire this area. So how will you arrive at this area? Total area which was reflected in above table minus zero point 0.5 will give you this area. Okay, so this table has values taken from this table. If you deduct zero point 0.5 from this table, then you will arrive at this table. And if you add zero point 0.5 in this table, then you will arrive at this table. Okay, so this way you can understand how the tables are given in the question. So if you have having a positive z value, but your probability given is less than 50%, then you can say that you have been given this area mean and z. Not, you are not given the cumulative probability. Now, what is value at risk? This question measures the risk of investment, what is the worst case scenario and what will be the loss, is the two answers which we get from the value at risk. Now, what are the features of value at risk? The components of value at risk are three: time, confidence, and loss. We consider time horizon. Value at risk can be calculated for various time: 1 day, 10 day, 1 week, 1 month. You can calculate it for any time horizon. We also take account the probability, that what is the probability of loss occurrence. We should also answer that question. Now we also consider the z score, which reflects the probability, and we also consider the statistical method, that is standard deviation, while considering the value at risk. And now what does the value at risk help us to? It helps us to control the risk. These all are the features which can define a value at risk. Now these features: question, time, confidence, and loss are components; statistical method based on standard deviation; time horizon 1 day, 1 week, 1 month; probability, that what is the probability of maximum loss. It can help to control the our risk. It can help to decide the limits for a maximum loss. Next is z score. It shows that how many standard deviation we are away from the mean. So this is reflected by the z score. This we have understood in very depth. Now, what are the applications of value at risk? How value at risk is being applied to a practical life? It help you to measure the maximum possible loss. When you make an investment, it will help you to know what amount can you lose in while making that investment. And it also help to set a benchmark for performance. Say for example, at 5% value at risk, one investment has a 5% value at risk for 1 day. One investment has a loss amount of 1 lakh and another investment has a loss amount of, say for example, 10,000. So which would you prefer? The one which had less loss probability. So you can set a benchmark. You can say that we have to achieve this value at risk. Our risk should be minimum. So this can help you set a benchmark for performance. And this is also a very useful tool to manage the asset and liability for banking companies. Next, it can help you to fix the limit of front office employee. Say for example, you may be knowing that every in banks every manager has their limits to sanction the amounts. One manager can have a limits of sanctioning the loan of amounting 1 crore. The another higher senior manager can have an authority to sanction the loan more than 1 crore till 10 crore. So various persons have a various limits. Now how these limits are being decided, they are being decided about uh, understanding the performance, understanding the risk they are taking and the return they are generating. Each manager's value at risk is investments value at risk is being calculated, and it will help you to set the limits so that to ensure you take the minimum risk and ensure the maximum returns. It also helps to decide the trading strategies. Many trading strategies are being decided based on value at risk involved in it. So this is the application. All the points are covered. Now there is a little caution added recently in MTP related to cyber risk. Now we are in an IT world now. So in an IT world, what is very crucial is a data. When we are sharing a data with companies, we need that company should maintain the confidentiality of our data. If we are giving our data to bank or any CA, we need that they should maintain the confidentiality. If they don't maintain that confidentiality and leak our data to some unauthorized person, then we have a right to claim the damages, to file a suit against them. So if a business is facing a losses due to leakage of data to an unauthorized person, then business has to bear losses due to cyber attack, then it is called a cyber risk. Cyber risk is defined as a risk of damages paid in lawsuit or a compensation to a victim of cyber attack in which data of customer, vendor, or third party is being linked to unauthorized malevolent entity. Now, what is malevolent entity? Malevolent entity means a entity which don't have a good intentions. They have a bad intention to misuse the data. They are called the malevolent entity. So, if data is leaked to some such person, then you can have a attack cyber attack, and you can be victim of it, and you have a data leakage, maybe intentionally or unintentionally. May there can be chances that your data has been hacked. It was unintentionally, but still you have to bear the damages, you have to pay the damages compensation to the your customers, vendors, whose ever data has been leaked. So this is the cyber risk. Now we come on to our practical questions of value at risk. Suppose you hold 2 crore of X limited whose standard deviation is 2% per day. Your standard deviation of 1 day is given. Total portfolio is of 2 crore. So standard deviation will be 2 crore, 2% of 2 crore, that is 4 lakh. Assuming 252 days a year, determine maximum loss level over a period of 1 trading day and 10 trading days. So you have to calculate the value at risk of 1 day and value at risk of 10 days with a 99% confidence level. Now, what will this 99% reflect? We have to take the Z value based on 99%. So if we look at this table, so here we see this is value very near to 99%. So our value will be 2.33. So our value will be 2.33 for 99 percentage. If we calculate this for 95 percentage, so here we see that this value is very near to 95 percentage. So it has 1.6.5. So 1.65 is for 95 percentage and 2.33 is for 19 percentage. So this is the Z value and this is the probability. So question will give you the value of Z. If it doesn't give you, you have to remember these two values, 2.33 and 1.65. So Z value we know, we have a standard deviation and we know time 1 day and 10 days. So we will apply standard deviation multiply by Z multiply by under root T. Now from this we can calculate value at risk for 1 day. Now how would we calculate value at risk for 10 days? You can apply this formula for 10 days, or you can say that value at risk of 1 day multiply by the time will give you the value at risk of 10 days. Okay, you can calculate either way you are comfortable with. Next question is, you have 2 crore investment in XYZ, 2 crore investment in ABC. Both shares have daily standard variation of 1%. So our standard deviation for 1 day will be 2 crores 1%, that is equal to 2 lakh. Okay, you have given a correlation as this is a portfolio consisting of more investments, so you are given a correlation. So you will calculate first variance of a portfolio, then a standard deviation of portfolio, then you will calculate value at risk. You are required to determine 10 days 99% value at risk. So standard deviation is given of one security, then you will calculate variance of portfolio. Variance of portfolio, variance of ABC, variance of XYZ plus 2 into standard deviation A, standard deviation X and correlation coefficient. So this will give you a variance. Under root of variance will give you the standard deviation. Now you will apply the formula of value at risk and arrive at the value at risk. This is very simple. Now the third question, this is very interesting question. This is based on a practical applicability of value at risk, and this in this question you don't have to calculate the value at risk. There is a reverse calculation required here. On Tuesday morning, before opening of a capital market, an investor, while going through his bank account statement, has observed that an amount of 7 lakh is lying in his bank account. So your bank account is having an amount of 7 lakh. This amount is available for use from Tuesday till Friday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So you can use this amount for 4 days. The bank requires a minimum balance of 1000 all the time. So you need to keep 1000 in bank. So rest 6,99,000 you can use. The investor desires to make a maximum possible investment where value at risk should not exceed balance lying in his bank account. So here you are given directly value at risk. So this is the amount of value at risk which you can afford to lose. The standard deviation of market price is 1.5% per day. The percentage of standard deviation is given, but you don't know how much amount is of your portfolio. You don't know the investment amount. So how could you arrive at standard deviation? So here you have to calculate the investment amount taking the reverse calculations from value at risk. So here we have given that 99% value confidence level we have to take. So reading this table, we can arrive at 2.33. So here we are given value at risk, we are given Z, we are given time, that is 4 days, but we are not given standard deviation. So we will calculate the standard deviation. First, we have to arrive at standard deviation for 1 day. So we have to calculate this value at risk for 1 day. Our this 6,99,000 is value at risk for 4 days. So we will calculate the value at risk for 1 day. So how would we calculate 6,99,000? We will divide it by under root T. So we will arrive at the value of loss for 1 day. This is the value at risk for 1 day. Now taking the effect of Z score, we will arrive at standard deviation of 1 day. Now this is the standard deviation of one day. 1,50,000 is a standard deviation, and we know that our standard deviation is 1.5%. So what will be the value of 100%? So total value of our investment can be 1 crore. At the By making an investment of 1 crore, we can say that our maximum loss for 4 days will be 6,99,000. So we can make the investment up to 1 crore. So this is a very practical application of value at risk, where you set a maximum loss limit and make your investment according to it. Now, fourth question. Considering a project where mean return is 2 crore and standard deviation is 1.6 crore. Now here we are given mean and standard deviation. And ABC Limited, if ABC Limited loses any project more than rupees 1 crore, there will be financial difficulties. Now, losing 1 crore means you have a negative amount of 1 lakh. Loss of 1 lakh means negative 1 lakh value. We are to the left area. Determine the probability of a company will be in a financial difficulty. Now here you are given a standard normal distribution table which gives the value between mean and Z. Now if you read the data, these all values are less than 50%, and this Z score is positive. If Z score is positive and values are less than 50%, then you can know, even though this line is not given, still you can understand that these values are from mean to Z and not the entire cumulative probability, because entire cumulative probability will be greater than 0.5. So if we talk here, first we will calculate Z, x minus mu. Here you have to take note that your x would, as your x reflects the loss, it would be negative figure. You have to take a star mark over there so that you don't make these mistakes in exam. So minus 1 crore minus average 2 crore divided by standard deviation 1.6 will give you an Z value of minus 1.875. So here is your Z minus 1.875. Here your loss amount is 1 crore. Okay. Now we are given a positive Z scores value. We are not given the values for negative Z score, but we know these both are the mirror reflections. So if we calculate the area for positive, we can say that this is a percentage for minus value also. So we will calculate according to the given data of 1 point positive values. Our Z is 1.875. So our Z is between these two values. So we have to calculate our value for 1.875. So what is this difference? This difference is of 0.01. For a change of 0.01 in Z, there is difference in probability of 0.0006. So this is a difference. So what difference you expect is the difference between 1.87 and 1.875 is 0.005. Okay. So if you know that for 0.001 change, there is 0.0006 change in probability. So for 0.005 change in Z, what will be the change in the probability? So you will arrive at that change. So the difference between them, and if you interpolate, you will get the value 0.0003. Now what will you do with this value? If you take the value of 1.87 as a base, then you will add this 0.003 to the value of probability of 1.875. Why so? As in when we travel to the right, our probability increases. As we cover higher area, so probability increases. So here you will add 0.003 to the 0003 to this value. And if you take the base of 1.88, then you will subtract 0.0003 from this value. Why so? Because 1.875 lies to the left of 1.88. So it will have a less value than 1.88 value. So you will deduct the value from 1.88 value. Now we can calculate this value with a shortcut, but you won't apply this shortcut in exam because ICA follow this interpolation method. But logically, if we say that we can calculate it without this interpolating, as 1.87 and 1.88, our 1.875 is exactly middle of this. So we can take, if we calculate 1.87 plus 1.88 average of these two values, we will get 1.875. So if we calculate the average of these two probabilities, then we can calculate the probability of 1.875. This is the shortcut average method. But this won't be applicable for every values, and you don't have to apply this method in the examination. So you would get an area that is 0.4696. So there is chances that a company will be in a financial difficulty. What are the probability of it? 46.96 percentage. So here our chapter ends. Now, you would say, ma'am, we have understood so many concepts, so many types of risks, valuing at risk. Is this all just a theoretical part, uh, or this has any relevance in a practical life? So I would say each and every chapter of your course is one area to practice in. It has in one area which where you can work. These are just the name. If we say that you can be a doctor, engineer, you can be a pilot, scientist, so these all are just a name. So these chapters are also just a name. This just give you the areas, hints, opportunities which can open up to you. So these are just an hint of the opportunities. There is much more in every concept to grow on. These all are very practical chapters. So we are taking a practical example little. This is a risk management report of a Tata Steel. We have understood strategic risk, financial risk, operational risk, ways to manage all them. So see over here that they have also financial risk, regulatory risk, operational risk, then strategic risk. They also mention the key mitigation strategies for the same. So all you have studies have a practical relevance too. So here if you see that financial risk, it arises due to foreign exchange rate volatility. Now what are the steps? They have also mentioned the steps that they take up the they take up the foreign exchange hedging policies for ensuring that they don't have a foreign exchange risk, currency risk. They have a competitive rates, so they also ensure the proper cash flow management so as to ensure the price and all stability. They have to follow the regulations, renewal of mining leases and all that. They have a set of compliance they have to do, and what they focus on, they do the timely legal consultation to mitigate that regulatory risk, compliance risk. So all this, whatever you have studied, has a practical exposure too. Now we are done with the chapter, but still a very important revision of a chapter. We have already discussed that once we will complete a theory chapter, we will take up the keyword revision of that chapter. So now we will take up the keyword revision of the chapter. The first question was, what are the different risks of a business organization? So there were four types of risk: strategic risk, and this was due to that a strategy is less effective or will result into the losses. The factors were consumer demand, technological change in consumer demand, competitive pressure, senior management turnover. And there were three examples related to that: Kodak, Nokia, and Xerox. These two were negative example, and this Xerox is a positive example. Then comes the compliance risks, which arise due to non-compliances and which is due to penalties, fines, and imprisonment. The example for that was sugar business in different state. A cement industry company was starting with a sugar business in a different state, so they have to take care of all the compliances needed. Next was operational risk, which arise due to failure to deal with the operational problems, which deals with people and processes. The example was employee pays 1 lakh instead of 10,000. Then comes financial risk, which arise due to change in financial factors like exchange rate, interest rate, and credit rating. Then comes the counterparty risk. Counterparty risk arise due to non-honoring of obligation, non-delivery of material, and non-repayment of loans. So non-honoring, non-delivery, and non-repayment. The methods to identify this risk is, we have taken the example of construction company. You have failed to obtain resources, there is a government restriction, or there is any action by the foreign government which creates the counterparty risk, or there is decline by party, that is either party let down or is insolvent to pay the debt. Next, to how to manage the counterparty risk. First, you will inspect through due diligence, then you will decide the limit, and do not overcommit to a single entity, and do review the limits every time. Even though after taking so much precautions, if there is a risk, then you have to take the rapid action and exercise the guarantee and insurance if you have taken that. Next comes the political risk. Political risk arise due to action of government, and it is mostly faced by overseas investors. How will you identify the political risk? We have taken that three restrictions and three interventions. Three restrictions on finance, that is borrowing, conversion, and remittance. Then three government interventions in three P's, that is price, patents, and properties. Price control by government, patent invalidated by government, and destruct overseas properties by government. Then techniques how you will manage the political risk. You will enter into the joint venture, local financing, and you will insist on a resident labor. You will also refer the political ranking and analyze the popularity of government. We have taken example of Narendra Modi ji. So you will analyze how government is the government popular, how is the ranking of that government. If good ranking, then you can take up a business in that country. How are the economic condition and embassies? You will inquire from the embassy. Next is interest rate risk. Interest rate risk arise due to change in interest rate, which is, and this risk is very critical for banking sectors, as they have interest bearing assets. How to identify the interest rates are governed by government, so you have to review the monetary policy and look out for any action of a government like demonetization. Then you have to analyze the economy and industry. Then foreign investment, you have to look out that is there sufficient foreign investment in the country, or is change in the stock market normal, or stock market is highly volatile. So you will look on to these changes to analyze whether there would be any chances of interest rate risk or not. Then how to manage the interest rate risk? That is through derivatives. Currency risk which arise due to change in exchange rate. And how will you identify exchange rate are also regulated by the government, so you will look for any action of government or change in government. Then exchange rate are decided through inflation rate and interest rate. These both rates affect the exchange rate, so you will also analyze this interest rate and inflation rate. Then any extraordinary circumstances can lead to the currency risk too, that like natural calamity or war. Currency risk is also managed through derivatives. Now comes the liquidity risk. Liquidity risk is that you have a liability but you are unable to pay the liabilities. There is mismatch in your cash outflow and cash inflow timings, and you are unable to generate the adequate cash. This is also important for the banking. Now, what were the different views related to the financial risk? There were three views from stakeholders, company, and government. Stakeholders look out to the financial gearing ratio. Higher the gearing ratio, higher is the risk. Then comes the company. If you borrow excess or lend to one who default, then comes the financial risk from the perspective of company. Talking about government, if a bank fails or there is downgrading of financial institution, then government has in view of a financial risk. Now, what is the value at risk? It is a measure of a risk which answer the two questions, that is worst case scenario and how much investment will be lost. So what are the features of it? Its components, three components: time, confidence, and loss amount. Then it is related based on a time horizon, maybe 1 week, 10 days. It is includes the statistical method, standard deviation. It includes the probability, that how much probability is there for the loss. It helps to control the risk, and it is also based on the Z score. Now, what are the applications? 5 applications. It helps to measure the maximum possible loss. It helps to create a benchmark for performance, to analyze the investments. It is a useful tool to manage the asset and liabilities for banking companies, and it helps to fix the limits for front office employee. Then it also helps to decide the trading strategies. Now, final last, what is a cyber risk? A cyber risk is a risk that you have to pay the damages in lawsuits, or you have to pay compensation to the victim in case of data leakage of customers, vendors, or any other third party is leaked to unauthorized malevolent entity. So here our entire chapter ends. I hope you have enjoyed this chapter and learned a lot. Let me also show you a keyword practice sheet. So once you have done this keyword revision, you will take this keyword revision 1-2 times and then write the keywords by yourself in a keyword practice sheet, so that you can recall this keywords very quickly and you have a grip on all the keywords, so you can perform well in the theory. Theory is very scoring, so to score in theory you have to put this little efforts of writing the keywords. So here is a look on a keyword practice sheet. So here is a question and space is being given to write the keywords. Some linkages are also being given, so you can have a quick revision, have a quick recall of all that. So I think this will help you a lot. Do practice it. Now let's move further to the next topic. We are not starting with next chapter. We are now covering a little basics topic. This basics topic is time value of money. It is a fundamental for all the finance. If you understand time value of money very well, then you can have a logic of n number of formulas, because valuations formulas taken up in a valuation, and many n number of formulas are based on time value of money. So you should have a good clarity on this topic. Now, what is time value of money? You must have heard your parents or grandparents saying that we used to have this thing uh, for just a little amount in our times. So you have may have heard this sentence. So what does this signifies you? That what value money was carrying at that time is different from the value it carries at this time. So there comes two aspects in respect of time value of money. First is the present value, and the next is future value. So what is time value? It states that the value of money today is worth more than value of money in future. So it is more valuable than you have in future, because what can be bought from 1 rupees at that times, at the time of our parents and grandparents, cannot be bought with 1 rupees today. So there is a change in the value of money. Previously the money was valuing more than it is valuing today. So present value holds more value than the future. Why it is so? So there are two aspects, present value and future value. Why there is a difference? So first a reason is consumption foregone has a value. So if you can spend 1 lakh today and you are not spending that 1 lakh today, you are sacrificing your consumption. So you expect a reward more than that in relate to the consumption foregone. So you expect a reward for consumption foregone, and there is also opportunity cost. So if I have 1 lakh rupees today, and if I have 1 lakh rupees after a year, then both cannot have a same value, because 1 lakh today I can invest in a bank and earn an interest. Say for example there is 10% interest, so I can earn 10% interest and grow my money with 10%. So there is an opportunity cost associated to the money which we have in a present. So the present value holds greater value than the future value. And their other reason is inflation, which I explained through the example that you might have heard that this product was costing at a very low price in previous years, and now it is costing greater price. So what it is due to the inflation. So the money value change due to the inflation. Now there is the reason is liquidity preference. Who don't want the cash in hand? Cash is king. So everybody enjoys the cash in hand. So liquidity preference is always high for the present money. And the other factor is risk factor. There may be a risk factor that if I give 1 lakh to you, you may not pay it back to me after a year. So there is a risk associated if we give money to and a credit. If we uh, take up the money in future, there is a risk associated to it. So it is better that to take up the money in a present. So always present value holds greater value than the future value. Now, what is the application of time value of money? It has n number of applications. There are lot many finance problems are being solved on the basis of time value of money. The first we take up is asset replacement. Suppose you need 10 lakh rupees after 5 years to replace some assets in a company. So you have to save the money from now to gain that 10 lakh after the 5 years. So you have to calculate how much you should save now to get onto that value of 10 lakh in after 5 years. This problem can be answered through time value of money. Other is loan repayment. We have taken up loan. and how much you should pay off to complete that loan in n number of years. So these type of problems is being solved by time value of money. Profit problem, that how much return should you expect from the company, or how much return you should expect from this business, is also addressed by time value of money. Then information systems also have an we use time value of money in various models, various aspects like lease, loans. So all these, when we develop systems related to this, we use time value of money for developing that system. Next, marketing. We also do the cost benefit analysis, because when what we spend now, how much return would it give in a future, is also the way to analysis the cost benefit analysis for a marketing. So we can take up time help, we can take help from time value of money to arrive at the best marketing strategy. Then comes the investment problem. Where should you invest so your money grows very well, is also being addressed by the time value of money. Valuation problem. Already told that valuation, time value of money is basis for the valuation. You may take about equity, bond, debentures. All these valuations are connected to time value of money. Next, accounting. Many accounting transactions like amortization and lease payments are being done on the basis of time value of money. Management take various decisions based on time value of money. Where should they invest, in what business project they should carry on or not, are all the decisions being taken up with the help of time value of money. Then operations, it also helps to carry out the operations, because what prices are expected in future and what should be the demand at that time, are many problems take the basis from the time value of money. So many operational problems also get answered through time value of money. Now, talking about time value of money, have to deal with the cash flows. So there are two patterns for cash flow. One is single cash flow, or there is multiple cash flow. Either you have to calculate your present value or future value relating to single cash flow. Say for example, I have rupees 10 lakh now. Now what would be the value of this 10 lakh after 10 years? So I have just a single amount and I want to know its future value. Or someone is saying that pay me this amount, pay me X amount, and I would give you 10 lakh in future after 10 years. So what should be the correct amount to pay? So I have to make the future value convert into the present value to calculate what should be the optimum amount to pay to get the 10 lakh in after 10 years. So we have to value just a single cash flow, and there could be a problems where we have to deal with the multiple cash flows. So FD, like FD is an example for a single cash flow. Then multiple cash flow, there are business projects which business not runs for a single cash flow. Business runs and derives the multiple cash flows. Like we also have an RD, pensions, which have multiple cash flows. In multiple cash flows, there can be three patterns. The first one is that there can be unequal amounts which you get in every year, or there can be equal amounts. Equal amounts is also called annuity, and there could be a perpetuity, that is you receive the same amount for infinite time, so that is called perpetuity. So there are three kinds of cash flows if you deal in a multiple cash flows. Now we have to take a note that whenever there is cash outflow, for when we are analyzing some projects, there is also a cash outflow included in that. So if we have to consider the value of the cash outflow, we consider that value with a negative amount representing outflow. Now, how will we calculate future value and present value? That is very simple. From one little formula, we will take up all and derive all the formulas. Just one formula, and that too, this formula is known to you very easily. So let's take up an example for that. See, for example, I have 1,000 rupees now, and that are being invested at a 10%. And what will be the amount you receive after 1 year? So that will be, you will receive 1,000 rupees, your principal, plus you will receive 10% on 1,000 rupees. Okay, so taking up 1,000 common from this, you can derive the formula, that is 1 plus 0.10. Okay, then this 1,000 is, this will be equal to 1,100. Now this is for, if you have to calculate for multiple years, you have to multiply it by n times. So this is let me wait. This 1,100 is in respect of 1 year. So how would you derive your formula? This 1,100 is your future value, and this is your present value. This is your interest or rate at which the money grows. So this is a formula. No rocket science, just simple logic which you understand very well. Now you have got a future value. You can derive present value formula from this. Present value will be equal to future value divided by 1 plus I. Okay. Now what is this 1 plus I and 1 divided by 1 plus I? These are the this is the future value interest factor, and this is present value interest factor. So 1 plus I is a future value interest factor, and 1 divided by 1 plus I is a present value interest factor. Now if you have to calculate for multiple years, you have to just take up the n number multiplications. So present value multiplied by 1 plus I raised to n will give you the future value for n number of years. So considering it in the present value, future value divided by 1 plus I raised to n will be the present value for n number of years. So this is the future value factor and this is a present value factor. So you can notice that both the factors are inverse of each other. Once you know one factor, you can calculate the other factor by calculating the inverse of the given. So there is a compound interest. Now Albert Einstein have said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who don't pays it. So if you know compounding very well, then you can take numerous benefit from compounding. But if you don't know the benefit of compounding, then you end up paying a lot due to not knowing the compounding. This can be just related to your studies and time management too, because if you save a little time today and invest that in your skills, invest in your studies, then you may be wondering, you may have a wondrous result, that you will grow at a very high speed just by investing, putting little time today in your skills and study will help you to get the numerous wondrous results. And you will be just wondering how a compounding can help you to achieve such a great score. So start compounding your time in a positive aspect, in your studies, in your skill also. So there are two types of compounding, a discrete compounding and continuous compounding. Discrete compounding means that there is fixed time which you can define for compounding, that is like say annually or semi-annually or quarterly, monthly, weekly or daily. These all are the type of discrete compounding where you can define the time at which the compounding will take place. So if you take semi-annually, then in semi-annually you will get compounding after 6 months, completing of 6 months. So there will be two cycles of compounding in each year. If you take up quarterly, there will be 4 cycles of compounding in a year. If you take monthly, there will be 12 cycles of compounding in a year. So when you have a discrete compounding other than annual compounding, your formula for future value and present value change. Now, what will be the change in that? This change is very logical. All the formulas will be logically connected and derived from one single formula. So, if I say that you earn 12% interest annually, now what would be the interest if you earn it semi-annually? So, that will be 6%. How will you arrive at this 6%? That is 12 divided by 2 because you compound it 2 times. So there would be 6% rate semi-annually. Considering same for quarterly, there would be 3% rate quarterly. Considering monthly, there will be 1% rate monthly. So how are you arriving at this? Your R or I is being R divided by T, the times of compounding taken place. So R divided by T gives you the correct rate. Now, if we consider that future value is equal to present value 1 plus I raised to n. So here you have to put the correct value of I, that is I divided by T. Also, the number of compoundings change. When you have annual compounding, you have compounding just one time. If you go for semi-annual, then your n will be 2n because you have a compounding of 2 times in a year. So if you calculate for 2 years, so you will have a 4 compounding for 2 years. So wherever you have n, you will take n multiply by t, and wherever you have I, you will calculate I by t. If you have discrete compounding other than annual compounding, so your formula will be for discrete compounding future value is equal to present value 1 plus I by t raised to nt. And similarly for present value is equal to future value divided by 1 plus I upon t raised to nt. So these are the formula. Now talking about the continuous compounding. Continuous compounding is where we cannot define a time in which our compounding is taking place. May it be a second or may it be less than a second. So we cannot define continuous compounding times, how many times continuous compounding will take place. So to arrive at a continuous compounding value, there was a research, and based on log they arrived at a value that is e raised to it. E has a constant value, and this e raised to it reflect the correct value if we are going for a continuous compounding. So whenever there is a continuous compounding, we use e raised to it instead of using I and t. So our future value will be present value multiplied by e raised to it, and present value will be future value divided by e raised to it. If e raised to it is in denominator, we can also write that as future value multiplied by e raised to minus it. Okay. Now, due to the discrete compounding, there comes a concept called effective annual interest rate. Now, what is the effective annual interest rate? When we say that we are earning 6% semi annually, like we have taken example over here, okay, we have earning 12% annually, 6% semi annually. So, this gives rise to the, when we say that we are earning 6% annually, that doesn't mean we are earning 12% annually, because the multiple compounding has greater value than a single compounding. So over here, our effective interest rate will be 1 plus I raised to m. This is also t, similar to t which we learned above. So this will be your effective interest rate. So we take up an example. If you earn 10.25% annual compounding and you earn 10% monthly compounding. So you may seem that this is 10% monthly compounding. Taking up the effective interest rate, in the first, the value will be 10.25% only because there is annual compounding. So effectively, you will earn 10.25% only. If you go for 10% rate per annum, but with a monthly compounding, then you will effectively yield 10.47 percentage. This is an effective yield you derive from this rate. So comparing these two, a monthly compounding is better than annual compounding. So for one single cash flow, if you have to calculate future value and present value, then there can be annual compounding or multiple compounding. All the formulas learned above can be directly applied for a single cash flow. Now we talk about, we have an unequal cash flow, multiple cash flows. When you have different cash flows for different years, then you have to do the compounding. Now what, when we convert the present value in future value, we uh, tell this process as a compounding. When we convert future value in a present value, we term this process as a discounting, because when we do compounding, we have a greater value, and when we do discounting, we have a lesser value. So you have to do compounding and discounting for each cash flow like a single cash flow, and add up all them to arrive at a present value or future value. So calculating that, when we talk about this cash flow, then we have to compound this for 5 years to arrive at future value. If we are calculating for 5 years time span, then we have to compound this cash flow for 5 years, and this cash flow for 4 years, similarly this for 1 year, and this will have no compounding, as this value will be having same value on that 5th year. Now if we talk about discounting to a present value, then this cash flow after 5 years will be discounted for 5 years, 4 years for 4 years. So similarly, you will also carry out the discounting. Now, when we talk about the factors, present value factors or future value factors, there is present value factor interest table, and there is also future value interest factor table, which we can directly use. We are also calculating in on calculator. For compounding, we take multiplications. For taking up the present value factor for discounting, we take 1 divided by 1 point any rate equal to equal to. So this is these are called the present value factor. So there is also a direct table for various interest rate and for n number of years. Okay, so you can arrive at a present value factor based on these tables also. This is present value factor table for single cash flow. What is a present value factor? That is 1 divided by 1 plus I raised to n. And what is future value factor? That is 1 plus I raised to n. This is for single cash flow. There is also a table for annuity. Now, how will we arrive at annuity value? We calculate on calculator by calculating the GT. First, we calculate all the values for n number of years, then we calculate GT. GT gives the annuity factor. So this is the table for present value annuity factor table, and this is a future value of annuity factor table. So for unequal cash flow, if we have calculating future value, you have to take all the cash flows value. When we take about when the we talk about zero cash flow, that will grow for n number of years, so you will compound it with raised to n. When we go on to the first year cash flow, that will be compounded for one less year. We have taken up here, so this cash flow is compounded with one less year compared to the 0 year cash flow. So we take up the cash flow of 1 will be raised to 1 n minus 1. Similarly, we go up onto I 1 plus I raised to 0, because this is the cash flow at the end of that period only. Calculating for present value, we will take up the discounting for all the cash flows relating to that particular year. And then we will take the summation of all that to arrive at a present value. Now there is an assumption. This is a special assumption, and this is not used widely in your calculations and all that. This is just for a general knowledge, that time value of money doesn't take the consideration of losses. So there can be a chances that company is continuously suffering losses. So there could be not earning, there could be deterioration of the money. So in that case, we calculate that by considering the negative interest rate. When negative interest rate will reflect the losses every year. So we at that time we consider the negative interest rate. This is a very special case which is not dealt by in practical questions in ICA. Now comes the annuity. Annuity can be of two types. First one is a constant annuity, and other type can be a growing annuity, where your annuity grow with a fixed percentage every year. Talking about any annuity, there is two types of annuity. This constant and growing is a type of cash flow, but annuity can be of two types. That is, first is ordinary annuity and the second is annuity due. What is the difference? We will look after it. Now, talking about annuity, if you receive unequal amounts every year, that cannot be termed as an equity because there is no same amount. And if you receive same amount but there is a gap in between, so you cannot term it as an annuity. If there is constant amount and for a constant time, then it can be termed as an annuity. Now, talking about two types of annuity, what does ordinary annuity and annuity due difference is? Ordinary annuity means you will receive your cash flow at the end of the year. And annuity due means, it is also called annuity immediate, which means that you will have a cash flow at the beginning of the year. So when we talk about first year cash flow, in ordinary annuity you will have a cash flow at the end of year, that is at the end of first year. But for annuity due, you will have a cash flow at the beginning of the first year. At the beginning, first year means 0 year. So every cash flow is preponed, prepaid in annuity due. So talking about future value of both these ordinary annuity and annuity due, when we talk about future value, the in ordinary annuity we receive cash flow from first year at the end of first year. So our cash flow starts from the first year. So these all will be compounded. We are considering 3 years time period. So this first year cash flow will be compounded for 2 years, 2 years. Second year cash flow will be compounded for 1 year, and third year cash flow won't be compounded. Talking about annuity due, this cash flow will be received at zero time. So this cash flow will grow for entire 3 years. So here we will have one extra compounding. You will have a one extra compounding when we talk about future value of ordinary annuity and annuity due. Talking about the present value of ordinary annuity and annuity due, ordinary annuity you will start discounting. So all the three cash flows will be discounted. But when we consider present value of annuity due, we have a cash flow on 0 years. So this cash flow won't be discounted. So we one extra discounting will be over here. We have one extra compounding over here and we have one extra discounting over here. Okay. Now talking about the future value of ordinary annuity. For future value of annuity, how we have calculated the future value of unequal cash flow. There our cash flow, the difference for annuity will be that our cash flow will be same for every year. So this would form a geometric progression where we can calculate this summation by calculating through this formula, that is a r raised to n minus 1 divided by r minus 1. Here a is our annuity value and here r is 1 plus I. So we come to this formula, that is a divided by I, 1 plus I raised to n minus 1. This is the formula which we arrive at after calculating the summation based on geometric progression. Now, this is the value for ordinary. Now, you can also calculate annuity value by considering the future value annuity factor, which we have taken up in the above tables. We have taken up the annuity factor, which we calculate through GT on calculators. So you can also calculate this annuity value by calculating the future value interest factor or present value interest factor. So for present value, what would be the change? For future value, the factor is this. For present value, the factor is this. So we take up the factor in this. So here the factor was 1 plus I raised to n minus 1. So for present value, the factor will be 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus I raised to n, because present value factor is this. But when we calculate this, then this will be less than 1. So we will take 1 before and then this factor. But for future value, we will take this factor then minus 1, because this would have a greater value than 1. So this will be taken first, and in present value 1 would be taken first. So there is a logic behind the formulas. Now talking about the annuity due, how would you arrive at the future value and present value of annuity due? There is very little understanding which we have taken up already. Now what if you have a value of ordinary annuity? Now what you have to do to arrive at annuity due, you have to just take up one extra compounding. What is a compounding factor? That is 1 plus I. So you have to make one extra compounding to arrive at the value of annuity due from ordinary annuity. So whatever is the formula for ordinary annuity, you just multiply 1 plus I into it and you will get the annuity due value. Similar, this is same for present value. How would it be same for present value too? Here, ordinary annuity, we have done one extra discounting. That is, we have done one extra discounting. So, neglecting that discounting, so we have to multiply 1 plus I to square off the extra discounting done in ordinary annuity. So we have to square off the extra discounting, and so multiply by 1 plus I will give you the annuity due value in present value also. So for for annuity due, what you have to do is you have to take up the ordinary annuity value and just multiply by 1 plus I. Whatever you have to calculate, future value or present value, the formula will be the same. So for annuity due, the formula of annuity is same, just you have to multiply by 1 plus I. Present value, same formula of annuity but multiply by 1 plus I. Now if you have a growing annuity, that is your annuity is growing every year by some percentage, in that case you will also have a growth every year, and your growth will start from the first year. So considering that wherever our formula was 1 plus I, 1 plus I raised to n minus 1. So wherever there is 1, we will replace that 1 by 1 plus g raised to n, because we will also earn the growth. And in denominator also we will take I minus g. Why? Because say for example I am earning 5% interest now. But if you say that you will have a 1% growth, so I would be at a same position if I have get a 4, if I get 4% interest. Why? Because 1% is growth for me. So I can balance out my requirement of return. I can reduce my requirement of return based on growth. So our requirement rate of return will reduce by our growth rate. So I will be I minus G. So this is a logic for this formula of growing annuity. For annuity due, you have to just multiply by 1 plus I. Similarly, for present value, you have an formula that is 1 minus 1 plus I raised to n. So here also you will consider the growth factor. You will take I minus g, and here I 1 plus g raised to n divided by 1 plus I raised to n. So you will take up the growth factor also into the consideration. Next, we talk about perpetuity. For perpetuity, what can be the example? That is, say for example, I put up 10 lakh in a bank and I earn 5% interest on it. Say for example, the that interest rate doesn't change. So I would earn 50,000 each year forever. Okay, so this is infinite cash flows, that is termed as in perpetuity. This is helpful to value the irredeemable preference shares, irredeemable debt, irredeemable bonds. All these are being based on the perpetuity concept. Now, talking about perpetuity, if we consider the annuity formula, in that our n will be infinite and anything raised to infinite will be infinite. If keep on giving you infinite money, then you will have an infinite money. So anything raised to infinite will be infinite, but 1 divided by infinity will be equal to 0. So anything divided by infinity will be 0. How? if we break down 1 in a n number of parts, if we take 1 divided by 2, then 1 by 2 is less than 1. But if we take infinite parts of 1, then it will hold no value. So 1 divided by infinity, anything divided by infinity will hold no value, so that will be equal to 0. So this would be 0. So 1 minus 0 will be 1. So you will have a divided by I for perpetuity. If you have a growing perpetuity, then I minus g. So we started with a one single formula and kept on adding the concept and build up all the formulas. So all the formulas are logically derived, logically connected. Once you know the logics, you can arrive at the formula. So this topic is done. Now we will take up the chapter, that is security valuation, after 2-3 minutes break. Now with the full energy, let's begin our next chapter, that is security valuation. But before beginning the chapter, you will again remind yourself the target score, your target score, my score for SFM, whatever your target is, write it again. May it be 85, 90, 95, whatever your target is. You have to constantly remind your mind this target, because reminding this will help you to give the energy. It will give you energy to work for that goal, and at the same time it will give you the direction, right direction to work on. Say you have enrolled for 6 days. When we are completing the entire portion of SFM in 6 days, then you too can complete it in by the same time. So you should also give value to your time, and you should work towards your goal with that approach, right approach. You should also give test. So whatever is necessary for that score, when you will remind your mind your target score again and again, you will get a right direction to work for that score. So you have, before beginning every chapter, you have to remind yourself your target score. When this first day is completed, then you will practice all the chapters covered on this day. Then only you will start the second day. So when you are preparing for every chapter, when you are practicing the chapter, before practicing any chapter, you will first remind yourself your target score. So your target score should be reminded every time you work for that goal. So let's begin with that energy for our targeted score, and let's make it possible. So, talking about security valuation, this chapter has an exam weightage of 8 to 16 marks, and there are total around 61 questions in this book for this chapter. The last day revision time for this chapter is 1.5 hours, and last day revision questions should be 18 questions, because in 1.5 hours you can do 18 questions only, according to me. And these are suggested questions from my side. You can choose your questions. You can plus minus these questions and plus minus this hours. If you have grip on this chapter very well, if you can complete in this chapter within less than 1.5 hours, then you can do it very well. But this is an ideal time, which according to me is suitable generally for averagely all the students. So considering that, I have allocated 1.5 hours at the last day revision of this chapter. So talking about security valuation, what does it covers? It covers what is the security? Security covers shares, debentures, bonds, preference shares, debentures. These all are covered under security. So this chapter deals with the valuation of all these securities. Why the security valuation is needed? Whenever you are investing in any security, you have to value that security so as to arrive that whether you are buying it at a correct price or not. The other aspect of security valuation is if you are buying some company, when some company is trying to buy another company, then the other company consists of shares, debentures, and all the securities. So one has to value that for buying the other company. So this is based on investor, as well as if you are going for merger acquisitions, then also security valuation plays a major role. Now you would see that this security valuation is very much based on time value of money, which we have already covered. So it has share valuation, preference shares, and bond valuation, and other topic is immunization of portfolio and enterprise value. Now, what does share valuation include? These are all the topics which are covered in this chapter. So, whenever you complete the chapter, you should have this checklist in your mind that whether you are done with this concept or not. So, if there are, say for example, there are this 7 concepts under the share valuation. So, when you are thorough with all these 7 concepts, you are thorough with the share valuation aspects. So this is equity share valuation. So when you are thorough with these 7 concepts, you are thorough with this. So you have to make this checklist, and then after completing the chapter, you should revise the formula and tick out that I know this concept, I know this concept. And when you know all the concept, your chapter is done. So share valuation has Walters model, dividend discount model, CAPM model, earning growth model, PE model, cash flow model, and there is also right shares valuation included in equity share valuation. Then comes the preference shares valuation, that is regarding redeemable and irredeemable preference shares. Then comes the bond valuation. Majorly bond valuation and share valuation is important. So bond valuation also covers normal bond valuation, perpetual bond valuation, and there is zero coupon bond. What all these aspects are will be covered in detail. So this is just a checklist. So when you complete the chapter, you should know what you have covered in this chapter. So many a times we don't know what aspects are covered in this chapter. So we don't know what we know or what is our weakness. If you know this checklist, then only you can identify that this topic is my weak area. I have to improve on this. I am unable to solve the question based on this concept. So once you have a concept checklist, then only you can determine what is your strength and weakness area and whether you have done that chapter completely or not. Once you will have this checklist in your mind, then you will be knowing that this chapter covers this concepts. So this type of questions can be asked over this chapter. So these all are the checklist. Now first, what is the required rate of return? Now what is required rate of return for all the valuation? What is mostly used is present value. Future value is not widely used. Present value is widely used for valuation. So when we are doing present value of any cash flows or anything, then we have to consider a discount rate. We have to consider a future value is converted into a present value using a discount rate. Now, what should be ideally this discount rate means that this discount rate is the minimum expected rate you are requiring. Say for example, say for example, I don't have to take any risk. I am investing in the government bonds, and government bonds are yielding me 6% rate. So there, if I want to invest in any other security, and then my minimum expected rate would be 6%, because if I expect 6%, then I can without taking any risk, I can invest in that bonds or that government security. But when I am investing in any other security, I am evaluating any other investment proposal, then my minimum expected rate will be 6%. So what is your minimum expected rate of return is very useful to identify what will be the present value of the future cash flows you will get. This is also called an opportunity cost. Now, how this discount rate is calculated, we have understood the formula that future value is equal to present value multiplied by 1 plus r raised to n. This is our basic formula. This we have also understood many concepts based on this formula. We started with this formula and time value of money and arrived at various n number of formulas based on this formula. So this formula is our base formula. Now we can calculate discount rate based on this formula. How would we calculate this R? So future value divided by present value is equal to 1 plus R raised to n. Now you will take a under root, that is future value divided by present value is 1 raised to n is equal to 1 plus R raised to n multiplied by 1 by n. So this n and n will be cancelled. So future value divided by present value 1 by n minus 1 will be your R. This is your discount rate. So you will arrive at your discount rate formula. What is your future value expected? What is the present value? You will under root it with n value, because this return you will earn for n years. In n years you will earn this return. So this will give you the rate of return. When there is multiple compounding, then you have to multiply this by t and also take nt over here. Why so? For multiple compounding, we know that our future value is equal to present value 1 plus r divided by t raised to nt. Okay, when we future value divided by present value is equal to 1 plus r by t raised to nt. So future value divided by present value raised to 1 by nt is equal to 1 plus r by t. So here you will also multiply by t. So here you will also multiply it by t minus 1 and also multiply by t. So you will get this formula. Okay. So this discount rate is also dependent on risk-free rate and risk premium. Now what these are? What is risk-free rate and what is risk premium? Risk-free rate is a rate which we get from by investing in a government securities. Say for example, I am getting 6 rupees by investing 10 rupees. Okay, or by investing, say for simplicity, by investing 100 rupees I am getting 6 rupees by investing in a government securities. So 6% I am getting without taking any risk, because the government securities are the safest securities. So risk free rate is the rate you earn on a government securities. Now what is the risk premium? Whenever I am trying to invest in any other proposal than the government securities, then I would expect that my return should be more than that, because I am taking a risk. So we won't take a risk if we won't get a premium return. So talking about weighted average cost of capital, so for discount rate, weighted average cost of capital need also to be understood. Weighted average cost of capital consists of two components. Every company will have two ways to raise the funds. The first one can be equity and second one is through debt. So what is the cost of equity? What is the cost of debt? You will add up then arrive at a total cost for a capital. Okay. Now, what is the cost of debt? That is very simple. The cost of debt need to be considered after taking the tax benefit. Say, for example, my cost of debt is 10% and I am under 30% tax slab. So my net cost will be 7%. Why so? Because after paying the 10% interest, I would uh, get the 30% tax benefit. So my net outflow would be of 7%. So my cost of debt after tax would be 7%. But this 7% is this 7% entire will be added entirely to my cost? No. Why so? Because this 7% cost is not in respect to my entire capital. My debt also only covers some portion of my capital. Say for example, my debt covers 50% of my capital. So only 50% of this 7 would be added to my total capital cost. So taking 50% weight, that is 3.5% only will be added as a cost of capital in respect of debt. So you have to multiply the cost by the weight of the debt. Similarly, when you get cost of equity, you have to multiply it by the weight of equity to arrive at a total cost of capital. Now talking about cost of equity. So cost of equity consists of three elements. That is, first is risk-free rate. Risk-free rate is our minimum expected rate. Then we have add the risk premium. Now what is equity risk premium? Okay, equity risk premium. You will add the risk you are taking to invest in equity. So equity risk premium, it is the factor beta multiplying beta by market risk premium. What is market premium? Market premium is that RM minus RF. Whatever you are earning more than the risk free rate in market is your market risk premium. Now, every each and every equity won't respond same return as of market. So say for example my market return is 10%, but my equity doesn't gives 10% return same as market. It may give returns 50% of market, that is 5% only. So there is a beta factor for each and every security, how it responds to the market. So when we are considering the market premium, we also multiply this by beta because our equity does not respond exactly like a market. So there is a responding factor to the market that is called beta. So we multiply this by beta to arrive at our equity risk premium. What is a risk premium that we expect by investing in equity? So our cost of equity will be risk free rate plus beta into RM minus RF. Okay, this is our cost of equity. Multiplying this by weight of equity gives us our cost of capital, total cost of capital. Now, whatever this formula is a CAPM model to find the cost of equity. Now, this is a weighted average cost of capital. We have considered this. We will find cost of equity and take its weight, cost of debt and take tax effect, then take weight. Now, what is internal rate of return? Now, internal rate of return is a return where our we know that we discount all the cash flows considering some rate. Now what that rate should be, where our initial cost is equal to present value of all the inflows, that is our NPV is 0. What is NPV? NPV is equal to present value of inflow minus present value of outflow. That is, your net cost should be 0. Whatever you are paying today, that should be equal to what the present value of all the inflows you will receive in future. So this should be 0 ideally when we are considering NPV. So this NPV should be 0 to calculate IRR. So our rate, we should discount these outflows with such a rate so that our NPV is 0. So how would we calculate this? We would calculate NPV. Okay. Now we would take a trial and error methods. We would take trial and error methods and calculate our NPV. We would arrive at one positive NPV near to 0 and one negative NPV near to 0. By taking these two rates and interpolating these two rates, we will arrive at a correct rate of return, that is IRR. You would calculate this IRR based on trial and error method. So by calculating with trial and error method, you will consider two rates where your NPV, the one rate which will give your NPV positive and one rate which would give you negative NPV. Considering these two rates, because our NPV will lie between these two rates. Once we get positive, once we get negative, so our 0 NPV will lie between these two. We would take NPV such rates that are positive near to 0 and negative near to 0. So you will calculate IRR based on interpolations, like what is the difference between these NPVs and what is the difference between the rates. So you would calculate, start with lower rate plus what is the difference between the rates and NPV at lower rate divided by difference in NPV. Okay. So by this way, you can calculate the internal rate of return. At this rate of return, when you discount your cash flows at this rate of return, then your NPV would be 0. Now, what is equity risk premium? We have already covered and understood while understanding the WACC, that is weighted average cost of capital. So this is a risk-free rate and this is your return of market. Whatever extra is achieved is a risk premium. This is a market risk premium, that is RM minus RF. This is not equity risk premium. This is a market risk premium. Then you would multiply this with beta to earn the equity risk premium. So there is risk-free rate and you add risk premium to get your total rate. This is a CAPM model. We also discussed that RF plus beta multiplied by RM minus RF. Here this is market risk premium and this entire is equity risk premium. So adding risk-free return plus equity risk premium will give us the entire rate of cost of equity. So beta is calculated by the formula like covariance of market and stock, that how they both vary internally and what is the variance of a market. This we would understand in detail in a portfolio chapter. Equity risk premium we understood, beta multiplied by market risk premium is equity risk premium. Now talking about valuation of equity shares. So there are three bases for valuing the equity. First is dividend based, earning based and cash flow based. So talking about first dividend based. First is dividend discount model. What is dividend discount model? Dividend discount model is nothing but just converting all the dividends we would earn in future and calculating their present value. So calculating the present value of all the dividends we would receive is the value which we can pay for our equity. So we are valuing equity based on dividend. So this is very simple. Just you have to take the present value. Now there could be one period dividend discount model or there could be multiple period discount model. Now what is the difference when you are investing for a short time period? Talking about one period, when you are investing for short term period, say for example 1 year only, then you would just discount the dividends and whatever maturity value you, not a maturity value, whatever selling value you will receive after selling the equity share. So for shares you will receive two income, one would be the dividend and other will be the selling price. When you sell the share you will receive some price, so you will receive two incomes, one is dividend and one is selling price. You would discount both these for 1 year as your period is 1 year. So you would discount this. This is a one period dividend discount model. When we talk about multiple period, then we receive many dividends. So talking about multiple period, there could be a zero growth dividends. That is our dividends remain constant or all the over all the years. So when we receive such dividends, then this can be called as a perpetuity. It would be same as a perpetuity dividend. You would receive same constant amount for all the years, so this should be valued like we value the perpetuity. So P0 would be dividend divided by KE. For all the valuations of equity share, you would consider cost of equity. When you have to value the debt, you would consider the cost of debt. When you have to value the company, then you consider weighted average cost of capital. Okay, so each cost has different applications. Now, when we have a constant growth, say that our dividend grow every year by 5%. So we have a constant growth in our dividends, then our dividends, our valuation should be based like perpetuity with growing perpetuity. So dividend divided by KE minus G. We had understood this formula in time value of money. Now talking about variable growth, when there is variable growth, not a constant growth, then there could be a two-stage dividend discount model or a three-stage dividend discount model. What means two-stage and what is three-stage? Two-stage means you have, say for example, for 5 years my dividend will grow for 5% and then after my dividend will grow for 6%. So there could be two growth rates, that is two stage dividend discount model. There could be three growth rates, one for, say for example, for 5 years my rate would be 5%, then for 3 years it would be 6%, and then after it would continue with 4%. So there are three growth rates available to you. So that is three stage discount model. This is this formula and this type of sums are not included, so we won't cover this three stage, but we would understand two stage. So dividend discount model is taking a present value of your dividend plus terminal value. Terminal value, how would this terminal value be calculated? You would understand this in two stage dividend discount model. So this part is the present value of dividend considering the growth factor 1. Say for example, my dividends are growing with 5% for 5 years. So first I would calculate the present value of all these 5-year dividends. Then after 6 year, my dividend is growing at a rate of, say for example, 6% for perpetuity. So that after 6 years my dividend can be valued like perpetuity, but this perpetuity value will be the value at the end of fifth year, because my dividends are starting from sixth year. So converting into the present value, I would get this present value at the end of fifth year. This is called a terminal value. This present value of the perpetuity dividends is termed as a terminal value, and this terminal value, so this is a terminal value where my dividend will be growth, my growth will be G2. So this is, say for example, this is D6. From sixth year, my growth is constant. So we would get this P5. This is a terminal value at the end of fifth year. When you are using a discount dividend of sixth year, then you would get the present value at the fifth year. So this is present value at fifth year. So I would discount this with a discounting factor relating to the fifth year. So you have to consider this also. So this is our value of equity by calculating the present value of all the dividends and then taking a present value of terminal value. Now, talking about earning based models, there are three models: Gordon's, Walters, and PE ratio. First, Gordon's model. Gordon's model is similar to dividend model, but it consider we at in this model we have to take it on the basis of earnings, not on the basis of dividend. Now, what is the relation between them? We have earnings, and some part of it is being distributed as dividend and some part of it is retained in companies. So say for example my EPS is 10 and there is 20% dividend. So 2 rupees will be distributed as dividend and 8 rupees would be retained in a company. So one model can be there that I would value my equity shares based on dividend, and another could be and I would value that based on earnings. So there is a perspective of investor how it want to value the shares. If I want to just earn the dividends, I am taking that investment based on dividend, then I would value that share based on dividend models. But if I am focused on their earnings, then I would value that equity share based on earnings. So this model is similar to that dividend model, but it takes account into earnings of a company. So how would you arrive at EP? How would you arrive at dividend? So dividend would be EPS multiplied by 1 minus B. Now what is this B? This B is retention ratio. So EPS multiplied by 1 minus 0.8, that is EPS multiplied by 20% will be your dividend. So this is same, but this is being valued on the basis of earnings. Okay. Now, what is G? G is equal to BR. Why BR? Whatever you retain in a company will grow, okay, will grow with, say for example, R rate. So whatever is retained will grow. So this gives you the growth rate. Okay. Now you have to notice this, that whenever you are taking a dividend, you are starting with D1, not D0. Why D1? Because you cannot discount the D0 for the same year. When I am receiving 1 lakh today, then that holds rupees value of 1 lakh today. I cannot apply the discounting factor for the money received today. So discounting cannot be applied at D0. You have to apply the discounting on the cash flows which you will receive in future, that is D1. Whatever the dividend you will receive in future can be discounted, not the existing dividend cannot be discounted because it holds the same value on the date of received. Now talking about Walter's approach. Now what does this Walter model say? Walter model considered that we would have two inflows. One would be dividend, which would we would receive dividend for infinite period, and we would also achieve gains from the retained earnings for infinite time. So considering the dividend for infinite time, we would value DPS divided by KE. So this will give you the amount of dividend. Then you would also have a growth on this retained earnings. Now what is this retained earning? Retained earning is EPS minus DPS. This is retained earnings per share. Now this retained earnings will grow with a rate of R. Now these are the returns, and this return will be generated forever for indefinite period. So infinite, so you will value this as a forever, that is perpetual cash flow. So you would value this R multiplied by retained earnings per share. This is your return divided by KE will give you the terminal value. This is like a terminal value over here. Okay, this is like a terminal value. Now this terminal value would be converted into a present value. This is just the terminal value of all the returns we would generate through retained earnings. So we would arrive at a formula that is R EPS minus DPS divided by KE square. Now what is the logic of this KE square? So you would know from this step, that is this is a terminal value, and this terminal value is then arrived at by converting into the present value. So there is KE square. So every detailed of the formula is being explained to you, so you don't have to mug up the formula, you know all the logics. Now what we would arrive, what decision we could take from this, when our R is greater than K, that is our retained earnings grow at a higher rate, then we should not give dividend, we should keep all the money in a retained earnings and grow that money. So retained earnings are higher, so we should retain all the money, 100% money. Whenever R is less than K, then we should distribute all the money as a dividend, because when we keep it in a company, it grow at a lesser rate and our K is higher rate, so we should distribute all the money as a dividend. If both are equal, then there is indifference point. The dividend ratio does not make any change. So this is the relation between R and K, and we should decide our dividend policy based on this R and K. Now third model is price earning model. What is price earning model? Price earning model is what is the price you are paying and what is the earning you are receiving. Say for example, I am receiving 10 rupees earning, and to earn this 10 rupees return, I can pay 2x amount. Okay, then I would pay 20. If I could pay 2x amount, then I would pay rupees 20 to earn the dividend of income of 10 rupees. So this too is PE multiple, that how many times of earning are you willing to pay. Okay, so PE is equal to market price divided by earning. Okay, so this is your market price 20 divided by earning. So you would arrive at 2 PE ratio. So we are valuing when we want to value the market price, that is market price based on PE. What we would consider is what X we are ready to pay for the earnings. Say for example, I am ready to pay 10x. Then if my earnings are rupees 10, then my market price would be 100 because I am ready to pay 10x of the earnings. There could be a unitary PE where price you pay is equal to the earnings you get, or there could be when the denominator is low, that is you are getting less earnings compared to the price, then your PE ratio is high, that is you are paying so much multiples than you are earning. When denominator is less, the result would be high. So less EPS, then high PE, more EPS, low PE. Now, valuing the equity based on cash flows. When we value equity based on cash flows, then we have to consider the free cash flow for equity. Okay? What is the free cash flow for equity? We would understand that. So, generally, free cash flow is like you have a net income, then you add non-cash expenses in that income because non-cash expenses are not your cash expenses and these funds are available to you, and then you will decrease the working capital increase. Why working capital increase would be deducted from this? Because whatever you have need into the working capital cycle, you have to keep that fund separately, and you cannot they fund these funds are not available for use because they are to be invested in a working capital. Whatever increase in working capital funds are required are to be kept separated, so you deduct this amount, and similarly for capital expenditure also you have to deduct the amount. Now, this is the free cash flow. But we want to know, we have to value the equity. So, we want to know free cash flow for equity. So, talking about equity, we would consider all these aspects in respect of equity share. Now, what would be the income for equity share? EPS will be the income for the equity share. Now, we would also calculate all these expenses, working capital, and capital expenditure for equity share. Whatever our total expense would be, we would multiply that with the equity ratio. Say, for example, I am incurring 10 lakh of cost, and I have this 10 lakh cost is done from entire capital. So, for what would be the share of this, what would be my equity share in this? Say, for example, I have capital, 40% debt, and 60% equity. Then 60% of this amount would be bear by equity shares. So 10 lakh expenditure, so 6 lakh expenditure would be attributable to equity shares. So whatever expenses ratio is attributable to equity shares, we would consider that only for calculating the free cash flow for equity. So you have to remember this, that you have to consider only the equity portion of all these expenses, working capital and capital expenditure. So, what would be the formula? Free cash flow for firm is profit plus depreciation minus capex minus working capital. But for equity, we would consider EPS because EPS is the income for equity. We would consider the depreciation per equity share. How would we arrive at it? Depreciation per share multiplied by equity ratio. So you would multiply by equity ratio to all the variables, that is depreciation, capital expenditure, and net working capital increase. So your formula for free cash flow for equity would be net income, that is EPS, minus capex minus depreciation plus working capital, because when we put minus sign here, then we have to consider this too as a positive inside and this as if with a minus sign, because when we open up the bracket, this minus would be converted into the plus. So this is nothing but this formula only. Now what is this 1 minus b? B is a debt ratio. So you would ultimately you are multiplying all these with the equity ratio, that is 1 minus debt ratio. Now taking up the valuation of rights. Now what are rights? Right shares are the shares which are given to the existing shareholder for a discounted price. Whatever the market price is, these right shares are given for a amount less than the market price. So existing shareholders are encouraged to invest more in the company. So one would be a market price and one would be a issue price. Issue price would be less than market price. So whatever difference between market price and issue price is the discount amount, and this discount amount is given to encourage to enroll for the right shares. Now after availing the right shares, the company's share value will go up. Okay, we would invest in a right share only and only when we would see some growth in future. So we would have a higher value after the exercising the right shares. We would have a higher value. So if I'm buying the shares at 80, then market price after the right shares allotment would be 90. Then and then only I would buy the right shares, because we would get a premium. So this premium is called value of right. When someone don't want to exercise for the right shares, they can sell their right. Now what would be the amount for that right? One would pay the amount of this gain to achieve that right share. One would pay 10 rupees to get that right from you and pay 80 rupees to the company. So the net cost to the new investor would be 90. 80 plus 10, that is equal to the market price. No one would pay you more than this. So value of right would be the difference of this X right price and issued price. Okay. Now what is X right price? X right price is the value that would be after the right shares are issued. Now how it is calculated? Before right shares you have P0 value and you have N shares. You are issuing N1 right shares. These are old shares. This is old value. So your value will grow after issuing right. The current value of equity is P0 multiplied by N, total number of shares multiplied by total existing price, plus you would receive money by issuing the right shares. What would be this money? Your subscription price, that is offer price, multiply by number of right shares. Okay, this will be the amount you will receive through right shares divided by total number of shares after right issue. So your equity would be valued at this value. So this is a theoretical X right price. So value of right would be theoretical X right price minus the subscription price, that is offer price. If you have to calculate this value per share, then you have to divide this by the ratio, right ratio. How would you uh, calculate this right ratio? The right ratio is when, like, say for example, you are getting one right share for every two equity shares. So this income you are generating when you have two shares, because this is the income related to one right. So when you have originally two shares, then only you will get one right share. So this income relates to existing two shares. So when you have to arrive at the value per share, you have to divide this value of right divided by the right ratio. That is, you would divide this by 2 to earn at the value per share holding. So now looking up from the formula book, we have covered WACC, we have covered how to calculate discount rate, we have covered EPS is very simple, profit after tax less preference dividend. What this is the income available for equity. This is income available for equity divided by equity shares will give you the EPS. And EPS can also be written by this book value per share multiplied by ROE. Now, what is book value per share? Book value per share is what is the book value of equity shareholders divided by number of shareholders. So, equity shareholders fund divided by number of equity shares. This is book value per share multiplied by ROE. What is ROE? ROE, whatever is return earnings available for equity divided by equity shareholders fund. So this is the return percentage ROE. Multiplying both this and this will cancel out, and you will have net income available for equity divided by number of shareholders. Number of equity shareholders, that is EPS. So you can write this EPS as in book value per share multiplied by ROE. Now, what is dividend payout ratio? Dividend payout ratio, that is, if you are earning 10 and if you are paying dividend 2, then 2 divided by 10 would be your dividend payout ratio. Dividend divided by EPS. What would be the retention ratio? That would be 1 minus dividend ratio, or the retained earnings, that is 8 divided by EPS 10 would be the retention ratio. Now, what if would be the growth ratio? Growth rate would be equal to whatever amount we are retaining in a company, we would earn return with our rate on that. So this is our growth rate at which our company will grow forever. So this is also called a sustainable growth rate, which can be maintained for a long time. Now, dividend discount model, zero growth, constant growth, variable growth, we have covered all these. You have to take note that whenever D0 is given, you have to apply a growth rate on this to arrive at D1. You have to compulsory apply the present value factor on D1. You cannot apply the present value on D0. So you have to take note on this. Similarly, for EPS also, you can convert the earnings of future into the present value. You cannot convert the present value into present value. So you have to consider EPS 1. When EPS 0 is given, you have to take the growth factor also. Walters model we have covered. PE multiple we have covered. Market price based on PE multiple we also covered that. X right price we covered. funds to be raised, that would be subscription price multiplied by number of right shares. How would we arrive at subscription price? So funds you will raise divided by number of right shares. Value of right x right price minus subscription price right per share, to divide by the number of right share per share. Earnings growth model we have covered, dividend discount model we have covered, IRR method we have covered. Now this is income statement. This is very simple. We have done this multiple times till now. Then comes the interest and fixed dividend coverage. Now what is interest and fixed dividend coverage ratio? What times profit is covering the interest ratio? That is, say for example, my interest cost is 10 lakh and my profit is 50 lakh. So my profit is 5 times the cost I have to bear for interest and dividend. So debenture interest and preference dividend, how many multiples are covered in the profit for that? So my profit is 5 times than this cost. So profit after tax plus debenture interest, because we are considering it for total debenture interest and preference dividend both. So we have to take the original profit before debenture interest. Okay. So we would add back the debenture interest and profit after tax and then divide it by debenture interest plus preference dividend. You can also consider here debenture interest after netting it off from the tax. After tax, debenture interest could be also be added over here. So you can work either or way. Now what is capital gearing ratio? Capital gearing ratio means what amount you are raising from debt divided by what amount you are holding as an equity. So debt divided by equity would be gearing ratio. That would include debentures and preference shares, and equity would include equity plus reserves. Now what is yield on share? So yield on share is yield you earn divided by equity share capital. It is the percentage return you earned on the share. Now how is the yield calculated? We would understand better it in the practical question. Now value of equity share based on yield, this would also be understood better in the practical question. CAPM model we have covered it. Dividend growth model covered. Free cash flow for equity we have covered. We have covered sustainable growth rate, asset turnover ratio, that is simple sales divided by asset. Interest rate, what is effective interest rate? So interest divided by liabilities. Say for example you have various interest bearing debt, then you will add up all the interest and divide it by total liabilities, then you would arrive at the net effective interest you are paying on all the liabilities. ROE, that is profit after tax divided by net worth, we have covered this. Beta, covariance by variance, we understand this. So here share valuation is completed. Now starting with our practical questions. First we are doing the question number 1. This question is from the additional sheet you have been given. Dividend per share, growth rate, beta, current market price is given. Risk free rate and market rate. You have to calculate the price of shares of both the companies. So you have to calculate this by the dividend growth model, because you are given dividend growth, and so you have to calculate the value based on dividend growth model. Now what is the comment on valuation based on a current market price and the price you get? So once you will calculate the intrinsic value, this is called the intrinsic value, which you will calculate based on dividend. And then you will compare this value with the current market price to know whether the share is undervalued or overvalued. So first we would calculate. Now here the dividend is not mentioned whether it is existing dividend or it is proposed dividend. So we have to write the assumption that whether we are considering this as D0 or D1. But if growth rate is given, so preferable is that you consider this as D0. So you can consider it at D0 or D1, but you have to write the assumption in the exam. So considering it as D0, you first have to calculate KE, that is as per CAPM model. Then you will calculate D0 1 plus G KE minus G. You will calculate the price of share. Now you have got the price. Now you will compare it with the current market price. So for X Limited, current market price is higher than the value of a share, then this share is overvalued, overpriced, and you should not invest in such share. Now for Y Limited, the price in the market is less than the intrinsic value. So that share is undervalued in the market and you can invest in this share. Now this is considering assumption that given dividend is D0. You can also alternatively assume that given dividend is D1. So you will calculate accordingly. When you consider this as a D1, you don't have to apply any growth rate on this.